Eh bien, on va commencer dans 2-3 minutes le live. Installez-vous tous. Test son. Ah, si, test, test son 1, 2, 3. Normalement, on devrait m'avoir.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome officially to all of you who are here present and for all of those who are online watching us, following the school and ReTech Center from around the world. Welcome from École de Ponts Business School, Paris. So my name is Saman, I'm the Vice Dean of the Business School, École de Ponts Business School of École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées, EMPC, with 280 years of existence, one of the oldest civil engineering schools in the world. And today, much more than a civil engineering, from data science to environmental science to finance to mathematics and everything else. So we are the business school of École de Ponts, and we work with executives who come from across domains and industries to follow us, to join the other like-minded people, entrepreneurs, investors, and policymakers from around the world in our executive MBA and executive DBA programs. So today is the third annual conference of ReTech Center, a center that we started 4 years ago at the school. It's a responsible technology center, a center for leveraging technology for driving the responsible transition that we're going to talk about, focusing on Industry 5.0. The story of ReTech Center is almost known for all of our participants, just for the sake of the records and also for those who are joining us online. So I'm very fortunate to have been working here at the École de Ponts Business School with very interesting and exciting people, such as our alumni network, who have been always supporting us with the ideas and development plans that we have. But of course, the team that we have from Mona Lisa, from Hina, from Hannah, from Gabrielle, from Sonia, from Bruna, and of course, Nelly, and many more who have been always supporting, and the Dean, of course, Professor Alain Rosen. So ReTech Center started as an idea that was an entrepreneurial idea that I had in mind. But then with the support of the team and the advice of the Dean and the board, we started it at the school, which as a passion project, it turned out to be a school's passion project. As an entrepreneurial project, now it's an entrepreneurial project that we are involving all the alumni, that you are going to see some of the fellows today on the stage with me, that we are building we are facilitating the transition to the Industry 5.0 that we are going to talk about. So today, the focus is on Exponential Innovation 5.0, but before that, we are going to talk quickly about the emerging desirable futures of Industry 5.0, what it is, what does it mean to executives, to investors, to innovators, and to policymakers that are coming from across domains and sectors. The emerging desirable futures of our markets and societies are being shaped at the convergence of two forces. So one is the digital transformation, technology, innovation, and science that we know that is there to stay with us. It's accelerating every day as we can see it. So on that side, we are almost convinced that we have to live with it. So better we leverage it for good, as we know. On the other side, we have the responsible transition, which includes CSR, ESG, SDGs, diversity, equity, inclusion, circular economy, of course, and all the responsible elements of the transition to a more human-centric, resilient, and sustainable future for all of us. So when these two forces come together, everything changes. The previous industrial revolutions and societal revolutions that we have had, they were always only focused on technology and digital transformation as the main pillars. Of course, there has always been responsible mindset and some values that some people have always tried to embed into innovation and the economic system and the design of our societies. But the main difference this time now is that we have the extreme pressure and support from the stakeholders, from policymakers, from investors, from consumers, and from innovators to drive the responsible transition, to embed circular economy, to embed inclusion, equity, and to make sure that technology can be served as a force for good in order to shape the futures that we would like to have for our societies and markets. Therefore, the digitally empowered, responsible economies and societies that are coming forward and are already emerging are completely new paradigms that we need to understand them. Again, putting the hat of execs, innovators, investors, decision makers, and policymakers, this is what brings us all together here today and those who are joining us online. So Industry 5.0, therefore, is where digital transformation and digital economy meets with sustainability and the responsible transition. We know how technology has changed our societies and markets. To some extent, we can guess how the responsible transition is going to support us with the transition to a more sustainable, human-centric, and resilient market and society. However, when these two forces come together, it's a complete different game. Why? Attention, investors, innovators, and policymakers. There's a new risk and readiness matrix that you need to be aware of. To put it simply, everything we have done so far in regards to Industry 4.0, and in some contexts 3.0 and before, they're already outdated. Competitiveness, leadership, foresight, strategy, business modeling, operational modeling, economic modeling, all of them are outdated already. Moving forward, they are outdated. If in the coming futures of markets and societies, we do not embed responsible transition at the core of our business modeling, at the core of our operational modeling, at the core of our economic modeling, we cannot make it. It's not me saying this. Of course, the literature is supporting me. Science is supporting me. And today I have real people, human people who are here with us senior fellows of ReTech Center, our graduates and participants of our executive doctorate in business administration, who will be joining me on the stage here to tell you more about different dimensions of this transition, of the transition to Industry 5.0, and how all of the small, tiny little triangles that you see on the screen is going to completely foundationally shift the way that we work and the way that we live. So Exponential Innovation 5.0 has a couple of characteristics. One is that about divergence, convergence, and emergence of technologies, that we have seen it already. You know, AI is nothing new. We have seen AI since the 60s. I didn't, but some of us did. We have seen how it's diverged into different contexts, and we have seen how it's converging with different operational modeling, with our infrastructures. We have smart infrastructures now, of course, smart cities and everything else that we have been talking about now today are being empowered by AI more and more. And this convergence is not only about AI. With blockchain, the same thing. Blockchain, when it started, it was only a peer-to-peer financial means of exchanging value. But now it's much more. Now it's about engaging the ecosystem, multi-stakeholder governance, and many more fascinating aspects that we are going to discuss with the experts today in this conference. So the convergence, divergence, it's like a circle that goes on. And what happens is that when these technologies like AI and blockchain converge together, AI and smart mobility, AI and transportation, AI and manufacturing, blockchain and AI and manufacturing, augmented/virtual or extended reality with manufacturing, with transportation systems. What happens is that we have the emergence there, the emergence of new domains of expertise, the emergence of new fields, new markets, new revenue streams, new strategies that we need to think about, new ways of doing things, new ways of learning, communicating, and exchanging value with each other. So this is one of the main characteristics of Exponential Innovation 5.0, which is technically, as you can guess, the 5.0 comes from Industry 5.0, which what we mean by this is innovation toward Industry 5.0, which is by design, is not linear. It is exponential, and we are going to see how and why, and we are going to even hear more about it and discuss even more in the final roundtable. The other element of Exponential Innovation 5.0 is that it has a lot of cross-dimensional integration of adaptive, agentic, and tokenized infrastructures and solutions and systems. We are seeing more and more in different industries. Today, we are going to talk about the space industry, the fashion industry, about governance. And we are going to see and hear from the experts how these solutions and infrastructures and business models and industries and markets, they are all converging together, coming together, and creating integrative value cycles. So they are coming from cross dimensions. But not only that, now we are interconnecting digital, physical, and biological realms together. So that makes a big difference that we are going to also explore more. We have collective distributed intelligence that we are developing between humans and machines, right? So we are bringing increasingly, cobotics is there. It's not new anymore, collaborative robotics, that the idea is that we understand how to communicate better with robots, how to increase the efficiency of their integration into our operational and value chains. This gives to a regenerative, participatory, and inclusive economy by design. So when we have the collective intelligence that is distributed across, now we are seeing more and more experts from across fields that are contributing to Industry 5.0 from different angles, from all industries, from health tech, from space tech, from smart manufacturing and mobility, and many more, from energy sector, of course. So by design, the new frontiers of our markets and societies are inclusive, are going to be regenerative, because we are talking about the emerging desirable futures. Of course, technology can also, it's a double-edged sword. It's like any other tool, can be used for good or for bad. Here we're focusing on the emerging desirable futures and how to make sure that The futures that we want to have for this planet and all its inhabitants is the one that we can collectively design and develop together. The upcoming markets and societies, the new strategies, the new foresight systems are going to have an ecosystemic view, which means that increasingly we see that we have to consider all actors. We talk about multi-stakeholder governance. In any business that you take, in any sector or industry that you take, increasingly we have more and more stakeholders that we need to think about. We need to include them in the governance systems, in decision-making systems, and all aspects of the business. So futures thinking and anticipatory governance are the key for this foresight-driven ecosystemic design. We have self-reinforcing value cycles, which means that we have feedback and feed-forward loops that are integrative in our systems now. Again, if we think about the integration of the physical, digital, and biological realms, then we can think about everything that was never possible before. Now with technologies, we are doing that. Maybe not at scale yet, but that's exactly where the innovators and investors and policymakers are focusing on, to see what is coming up, what needs work, what are the challenges, where are the opportunities. Therefore, a concept that I introduce is integrative value ecosystems 5.0, in which as you're walking, or as you're driving, or as you're being driven by an autonomous car, as all the trees around you and everything, all the nature around you is already connected to the same ecosystem, that all the humans are connected. We are already connected with our smartwatches. Well, this one is dumb, but you all have, with our phones, with our cars that are technically a bunch of IoT and smart devices on 4 wheels and a couple of doors. So increasingly, we are living in a world that the ecosystem is exchanging value beyond financial metrics. It's no more only about financial transactions. If you think about autonomous systems and autonomous cars, transportation systems, aviation, whatever you want to take, spatial, maritime, whatever you want to take, as soon as they're autonomous, they're exchanging value with each other. They have to exchange information with each other in order to coordinate and to drive the system autonomously. We're talking about autonomous systems. So this biological, physical, and digital realm coming together with the integration of all the industries and sectors that are all, of course, integrated within the digital economy, which must be responsible in order to design the emerging desirable futures. They come together under the integrative value ecosystems 5.0, which would need finance 5.0, which is a complete new domain of finance, which is not only about financial transaction, but again, about exchange of value in different forms. In the same vein, we have fashion 5.0 that we are going to talk about it today as well. We have governance 5.0, innovation 5.0, therefore exponential innovation 5.0. And any discipline, any function, skill, and competencies that we have needs to be upgraded to 5.0. Technically, everything that is not going to be 5.0 will be outdated sooner or later. Many have already been outdated. We are going to hear about our experts today. So now, with that in mind, just to tell you that at ReTech Center, we have 4 labs, the RISE labs, that we focus on these topics and many more. R for research, I for innovation, S for skills, and E for engagement, which they bring together our ReTech publications, ReTech Academy, ReTech Venture Builder Studio, and ReTech Advisory Club that are being driven and empowered by our alumni and graduates, who are, many of them are here and online with us. Long story short, you can guess what we do there, but just for the sake of putting it on the screen in case you want to take a screenshot for those who are online or for those who are here to take a photo from the screen, this is what we do here. So, but all of the conversations that we had would need new systems, would need new thinking systems, right? It's not only about futures thinking, but also about responsible thinking, about strategic thinking, temporal thinking, emergence thinking, and so on. So what happens is that we have new breeds of multifaceted enabling and disrupting forces that are coming from all around. But the question is, how do we ensure that the digital economy and digital transformation is going to be led by the responsible elements, by the value systems of the responsible transition, including, again, SDGs, CSR, circular economy, ESG, all the impact measures that you can think about are under the umbrella of responsible transition. This is how I simplify it always. However, to do this, we need responsible tech diplomacy. We need to make sure that we diplomatically and strategically lead the innovation and integration of our digitally empowered tools and solutions into our markets and societies to reflect the values of the responsible transition. So I have the best person to talk about this. I have one of our good friends, of course, a good friend of mine and a good friend of the school, currently officially a doctoral candidate at École de Ponts Business School and a fellow at ReTech Center. Ayumi Moore, who is with us today, but she's very kind to join us online from California. If we have Ayumi, we can have her on the screen already. Hi, Ayumi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, and you?
Please, so the floor is now for Ayumi to talk about responsible tech diplomacy and guide us through this conference as the guest of honor and as the keynote speech of the conference. Thank you for joining, Ayumi, and good morning to you.
Good morning, good morning. I've been waking up for a long time already because I was expecting and I was looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much, Saman and the entire school. I'm a very proud fellow of École de Ponts Business School, a doctoral candidate, and also a fellow of ReTech Center. And I am the founder and the president of Women in Tech Global, which is a global organization where we empower women across the world in many different sectors, from education, business, digital inclusion, advocacy, but also through policy frameworks, because we know that decisions are being done at that level. And this is where we can make sustainable change and drive much more Transformation 5.0, as said Saman. I'm also the founder of the Tech Diplomacy. This new venture that I started was one of the babies, one of the thoughts also that came along my doctoral studies at the school. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about tech diplomacy in the digital age, especially now the age of AI, and how building trust in our digital future is so important. We are witnessing the most fundamental transformation of diplomacy since the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. Today, the conversations that are shaping our future and our world, they don't happen only in the ministries or in the governments. They are also happening in many different places, like right now where I am here in Silicon Valley, in California, in Paris, in Beijing, in data centers, and in the algorithms that are increasingly governing our daily lives. So if you consider this, Microsoft, Apple, and NVIDIA, they have a combined market capitalization of about 9.8 trillion USD, which exceeds the GDP of Germany and France together, right? That's about just over $8 trillion. So these companies, they are digital superpowers, and they have become geopolitical actors, and the power they have, they rival nation states. So when Denmark appointed the world's first tech ambassador back in 2017, so that was only 8 years ago, it was acknowledging this really new reality, right? The technology companies, they have become geopolitical actors, and so they require new forms of diplomatic engagement. So tech diplomacy today, there are many definitions, but it's quite a new trend. And so I like very much Brazil's tech diplomat. Well, I am Brazilian, so I'm a little bit biased, but the tech diplomat from Brazil, Eugenio Garcia, he says it is the conduct and the practice of international relations, dialogue and negotiations on the global digital policy and emerging technological issues among states, the private sector, the civil society, and other groups. So you see, it's not just states, it's really bringing this whole ecosystem together at the same time. So tech diplomacy is not just a term either, right? It is the broadest umbrella that is evolving the diplomatic vocabulary that we have today. So we started a couple of years ago with the e-diplomacy, which is using social media platforms for diplomatic engagement. And I think you've seen, it must be all over Twitter and X, all that's happening, and they're using really as a means of political engagement. We have the cyber diplomacy, which is addressing cybersecurity, cyber norms, and digital infrastructure protection. Then above that, we have the digital diplomacy, which is managing all the intersections between diplomacy and the internet. And then overall, the real umbrella is tech diplomacy. This is what we're having today, which encompasses all of the above, plus the emerging technologies like AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, and blockchain. But unlike traditional diplomacy, tech diplomacy recognizes three fundamental shifts that are changing from traditional diplomacy. The first one is that technology is not neutral, right? So it's a socially constructed and it's embedded in political environments. So if you're doing it, I don't know, in the East or in the West, you're going to see there's going to be bias, they're going to be embedded within this technology. And that power is distributed. So this power that they had before, which was on nation states as sovereign countries, they are being distributed among states, among corporations, civil society, and technical communities. But the stakes they are having today, they are really existential. They go from national security to human rights, to ethical, to economic survival, to where the world is going to be and how it's going to be shaping the future for tomorrow. So just like science diplomacy, tech diplomacy operates around three interconnected dimensions. The first one is tech for diplomacy. So here we have like building partnerships with technology companies, multi-stakeholder platforms that will influence the development and governance of emerging technologies, right? So also the fact that we have established diplomatic roles and missions specifically focus on tech engagement, like the tech ambassadors, special envoys, consulates in innovation hubs. This shows that tech for diplomacy. At the same time, we have diplomacy for tech. So we're setting global standards for AI development and deployment. We can manage also relationships with tech giants and startups and addressing things like cybersecurity, digital rights, and technology regulation. And the last one is technology in diplomacy. We have today virtual embassies like Barbados, it's in the metaverse. We have digital embassies like in the UAE with Core 42 or with Estonia. Then we also have like blockchain secure diplomatic communications that are really wiring communications and diplomacy around the world. But here's the central tension of our time. I'm now in California at the World Economic Forum retreat. And I tell you, 3 days of retreat, the main thing we are talking about, its main tension is who controls the data that is powering this AI. Because we are facing today what we call the privatization of AI sovereignty, where the key assets needed for AI, which are the massive data sets, the computing infrastructure, and the proprietary algorithms are owned by the private companies rather than the government, right? So what's the problem? The problem is that the best AI infrastructure, like the cloud platforms, the data storage, the high-performance computing, is often provided by the global companies like AWS, Microsoft, Google. So even the national governments, the states themselves, they may lack full oversight of how this AI is being developed and deployed within their own borders, right? So what do nations want? Nations, they want to control their data because they've got 4 critical reasons. We've got many different levels of importance of data, right? So for national security, we have sensitive defense, healthcare, energy data, strategic assets. We don't want it to be, lying around and not having control over it. We have economic competitiveness. Data is a real raw materials, like the food for AI and for innovation and for economic growth. So it's gold, it's the new gold. And then you have regulatory compliance, because governments must enforce the privacy standards and the ethical standards and the human rights obligations of their own territorial values, right? And then we have the cultural values as well, because data reflects the local languages, the customs, and the societal norms. And just on the side, one of my papers for my while I was an EDBA student was on gender bias in AI. And what I found in this quantitative research is that not only there was gender bias in AI, but it differed across different platforms, different AI models, but also across different languages. So languages that were more like Latin or Russian or Arabic, they were more, they had more bias than languages that are neutral, like English. So the core concepts of nation states, of geographical sovereignty, and of data sovereignty have become super, super important, right? The countries are increasingly working to make sure that the data generated within their borders is governed by their own laws and their own values. So this only means requiring that data is stored and managed locally, rather than being sent to servers in other countries. And ultimately, it's about maintaining control over both the physical territory and the digital information, and ensuring that national interests are protected. But here comes a paradox. AI's power comes from combining diverse data sets across borders. When countries fragment data behind national firewalls, where they build walls, and walls, they may protect the sovereignty, but they are limiting the power of innovation. As one expert here noted during my stay here at the WEF, they're saying the beauty of what AI brings to bear is a large amount of data being banged against each other. But data sovereignty initiatives can break the capability of AI to be used as successful as it might be. And that's not only the thing. Moreover, AI needs power, because we have these giant computers, these billions and millions of data sets, and for them to operate, they're going to need power. So power is king in AI, right? So if you have power, you're going to rule. But in many countries, mostly in the global south, there isn't enough power. There's not even connectivity, not even Wi-Fi in many places, not even electricity. So how are we going to be managing this growing digital divide, which is going to be accelerating, exacerbating inequalities, development, and progress? If you think about it, by 2050, one person out of 4 is going to be an African. So how can we avoid this digital, almost neo-colonialism we are talking about, having the global north and the global south? The global south often finds itself as a provider of raw data for AI systems, which can be developed anywhere, while lacking the capacity to shape how these technologies are going to be designed or deployed for themselves. So some countries are trying to find solutions, like the UAE, for example, with the Core 42, where they propose virtual digital embassies, where the data center or the environment which they are owning, it resides in the UAE, but you own the land, right? It's going to be the country. So for example, Kenya or another country, Africa, if they want to put their data in the UAE, in this digital embassy, they will be able to own the land and own the data, and the equipment, right? So now the countries, they don't have the capacity to export, to have it within themselves. They can export the data. But imagine if you're a country, now what country would like to export all of their data, their sensitive data, the top secret data, to another country? And so all of this, the frameworks, the policies, the innovations, ultimately comes down to one fundamental challenge, and that's trust. Because right now we have a trust crisis around the world, across all different sectors. We have citizens that don't trust governments with the data. We have governments that don't trust the tech companies with the critical infrastructure. And the countries, they don't trust each other, that's for sure, to share sensitive data. And the tech companies don't trust regulators to understand their innovations, and the global south, they don't trust the global north to share AI benefits equitably. So how do we build trust in an age of AI and digital transformation? Right now, we are at crossroads. I'm not sure we have the answer. We are all working on it, because at one side, we have a path that's fragmented, where your rights, your opportunities, and your freedoms depend on which tech company server your data is going to be living on which country's AI models are going to be shaping your reality. And on the other side, we have a path that's going to be serving more humanity, where AI is going to be enhancing human dignity, human values, ethical AI, where the digital transformation someone has just spoken about is going to be reducing inequality rather than deepening it, and where innovation happens through collaboration rather than competition. And once again, as my Brazilian friend, Eugenio Garcia said, technology is constantly changing, and the ultimate goals of diplomacy, nonetheless, that are essentially very, very similar to what they were in the ancient times. How to conduct international relations by negotiation, cooperation, or any other peaceful means in order to promote friendly exchanges among the actors involved. Because at the end of the day, we want technology. Technology is only a tool, right? Trust is what's going to be determining whether that tool is going to be building bridges, or if it's going to be building walls, whether it's going to be connecting us or whether it's going to be dividing us. And the question is on whether AI transform international relations, because it already has. We are in it. The question is whether we are going to be shaping that transformation through trust, through cooperation, and through shared responsibility, or if it's going to be done through fear, competition, and mutual suspicion. Because the future of tech diplomacy, the future of the world, of our interconnected world, depends on our ability to trust each other enough to work together. So this is both our greatest challenge and our greatest opportunity, and I hope you're going to be using it for good. So thank you so much, Saman, for this opportunity, and I know that you are one of those who are leading this digital transformation 5.0 in the best and the most positive and ethical ways possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ayumi. We are very honored to have Ayumi as a part of our community, as a good friend of the school, as a part of our EDBA, but also we are very proud that we are also supporting her initiatives at Women in Tech and also the Tech Diplomacy Forum, in both of which we are partners. And personally, I'm very lucky also to be supporting Ayumi as her advisor for a doctoral project. So you can guess the amount of the community support that we bring under the same roof is just unbelievable. And that's what we do here at the business school. We ask questions. We don't pretend that we have the answers. The only answer that we provide to everyone is that we need collective thinking and a collaborative approach for an ecosystemic design of the emerging desirable futures. The rest is conversations and thinkings, which we have been done for the past 2 days with our brilliant doctoral candidates and graduates who gathered from around the world, from China, from Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Middle East, of course, to talk about these things in our research acceleration workshop on Industry 5.0. So what do we have today? After the brilliant keynote of Ayumi setting the tone for the rest of the conference as well, I guess the clicker needs some help from the tech room. Thank you. No, let's go back to the main slides, please. I'm going to tell you about what we are going to discuss today, what is the flow of this session, and who we are going to listen to and hear today, what type of expertise we have. So this round of the conference is designed in a way that we have Ignite talks, flash pitches from experts. So on each topic, we are going to have about 15 minutes of high-level conversations and the points that makes us reflect. On each topic, we're going to spend 15 minutes from space, fashion, Web3, blockchain, DAOs, AI and agentic governance systems, and cognitive cities and cognitive governance systems. After the flash pitches that we will have one by one our guests here on the stage sharing their insight with you, the result of their doctoral project, the research that they're doing at the intersection of intellectual capacity building and practical execution. After that, we're going to have a break, and then we bring everyone together here on these chairs in a round table to interconnect the topics, to see how space is going to support fashion, how blockchain is going to support space for fashion, how all of them come together under the umbrella of governance. And the red thread of all of them is 5.0, and of course, Exponential Innovation 5.0. So for the next topic, we are going to talk about Space 5.0. It's not just as simple as adding a 5.0 there and just saying that we are now in the next revolution of industry or society toward being more responsible. No. In each of these different industries or disciplines or functions or skills or competencies, 5.0 has a different meaning. When we talk about space, the integration of technology in a responsible way and the responsible tech diplomacy within that industry is very different from transportation, from fashion, from the gaming industry, and from all other industries. This is exactly about the risk and readiness matrix that I shared with you a couple of minutes ago on the screen. In each industry, those dimensions are being redefined in different ways. Some of them faster, some of them stronger, some of them more foundationally from bottom up, and some of them from top down. So this is what we are going to explore now with our speakers. So the first speaker that I'm going to invite to join me on the stage is Dr. Bharat Madan. Yeah, you can come with dancing already. Thank you very much. So Bharat is a good friend, and of course, a senior ReTech fellow. He's a graduate of our executive doctorate in business administration program, and I had the privilege of being in the same class with Bharat for the doctoral project as well. So he's always supporting ReTech Center, and he's one of the experts that we have in the field of Space 5.0. Thank you very much for joining us, Bharat. The floor is all yours. Take us up there. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you once again, Saman. Thank you to the school. Happy to be here once again. Last year was fun. So today I'm going to be talking about Space 5.0, which is very close to my heart. Space is, anyway, should be close to our hearts. But let's just go. Today I'm going to be talking about the pale blue dot and the shiny orbital leap. Poetic, right? But before we start, I think the first session was very good. What I would request all of you and even people who are watching here to just close your eyes for a moment. Trust me, I'm not going to run away. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Now open your eyes. Look around. Look at your neighbors. Look at the ceiling. This is not a mindfulness class, trust me. Appreciate where you are and understand that you have this pleasure of feeling what is happening right now. This is the space that you can feel. But from that logic, I would like you to bring your focus back on the screen. Do you see this pale blue dot? Carl Sagan said, that's here, that's us, that's home. That's the picture of Earth taken from 6 billion kilometers away from Voyager 1. Why am I showing you this picture? Because I want to bring that perspective. You know, there are a lot of data numbers that we can talk about, but to be able to understand what Space 5.0 is, we need a vantage point to see how do we take a leap from where we are, which is Industry 5.0, to be in Space 5.0, because it's a very, very relevant topic for all of us. So with that, I will not define Space 5.0 because last year, and I'm happy to discuss later on, last year we talked about how new space was connecting to Space 5.0. What you see in this picture here, it might look like a movie, sci-fi movie, right? It looks like a fiction, but that is not a fiction, right? So we know a lot of use cases of space in terms of what we see on our mobile phone, et cetera, but there are also other use cases like space manufacturing and other aspects that I want to talk about, because Space 5.0 offers a vision where we just don't want to go to the space just for the sake of creating wealth or to empower us. No, it's more about how do we sustain our life on Earth? How do we make our planet more sustainable? This is why it is human-centric. This is why it is needed for all of us, Space 5.0. So that's not fiction. However, to be able to make that image that you have seen here, I made it from AI, to make it true, we need to take exponential leaps. We need to be fearless. And that's where we are going to talk about the exponential aspect. It's very easy to say exponential, right? So let me just bring back again one more example here. What if I fold a piece of paper 42 times? I know theoretically we cannot, or practically we cannot fold the paper more than 7 times or 8 times, if you know that, any size of paper. But if, let's imagine we keep on folding the paper 42 times, we're going to build a bridge between Earth and Moon. That's the power of exponential thinking. That means you are doubling every step from the previous one. And that is what we need in the space domain. And that's why I use that picture to trigger that emotion. 42 folds it takes for us to reach to the moon. We have to behold the power of exponential thinking. We have to talk about Space 5.0, where it's not just about 10% increments, it is about 10x, 20x, 50x improvements. So some of the examples that I would like to share about Space 5.0 are here. We can talk about multiple use cases from downstream to midstreams to upstream solutions. But today I'm going to talk about the exponential aspects. That's the topic for today. Orbital manufacturing. How many of you know about orbital manufacturing? Perfect class for me. So orbital manufacturing is actually, it's nothing out of the space. Actually, it is. But it's the manufacturing in the orbital space, in manufacturing in the orbits outside the gravity. So there are actually a lot of materials, polymers, metals that can be manufactured in the orbit and have higher performances as compared to what we can do on planet Earth. For example, Zebilan, which is a crystal that can be prepared in the orbit and has multiple amazing features. I'm just keeping it very simple by calling it amazing, not going into the scientific details, but it can help the communication move faster. So it's like a fiber, which is going to be predominantly helping us. You can also make protein crystals in the orbit, which can treat cancer. Right? So there are a couple of startup companies that have tried to manufacture antivirals in orbit, and that's a possibility. All these examples are not in the PhD thesis. They are happening right now. The market that we're talking about in space is going to be reaching $1 trillion, and space manufacturing is already in a couple of $100 billion. So there is definitely a commerce demand behind it. Then we talk about we all know the crisis of clean energy that we need. Space-based solar power, right? So that is also one of the interesting use cases that are coming up exponentially. It is proven that if you have uninterrupted solar power in the space, you can have the solar panels perform 40 times better than what you have on Earth. 40 times. And there are a lot of startups that are able to communicate or send the energy from space to the Earth using microwaves and other technologies. These startups are already working on it, but not just the startups. The European Space Agency have launched a project called Solaris, which is aiming to supply 10% of Europe's power by 2050. It's not theory, it's happening. In-orbit data centers, we just saw Ayumi talk about AI and how we all know AI is becoming such a buzzword, but also it is happening everywhere. The demand for computing is increasing day by day, not just because we want to take pictures and convert ourselves in Ghibli, it's also the other use cases. AI demand is going to go crazy. How do we get the data centers? One of the McKinsey reports says that we will need to spend $7 trillion by 2030 to meet the demands of AI computer, everything that we do in terms of computing. This does not even factor the amount of changes that are going to come in terms of AI. How do we get that? So there are possibilities, some of the startups that are already in there to launch data centers in the space, not just for the use cases within the space, but also communicate to the Earth. Thales, for example, they're already working to launch 13 satellite constellation, which is like a medium-sized data center as an experiment. So things are moving fast. In situ resource utilization, that's where we are even trying to play like God. For some of the startups, they have been able to successfully extract oxygen from Martian carbon dioxide, right? Asteroid mining, as I think Neil deGrasse said, the first trillionaire, if it has not happened already, is going to be a miner, somebody who's mining from the asteroid. So things are changing rapidly because of some of the people, researchers, people like you, who were in some of these events and decided to move forward in space and decided to take those steps. But things are not that rosy every time, right? So it's not that easy. There's space debris. We have 12,000 satellites up in the space, creating potential hazards. We all know we are already highly dependent on space. If something happens, we are all going to suffer. What are we doing about it? Do you even know one of the only international treaties that we have for space is from 1967? And that time there were two countries, out of which one country is not even existing right now, USSR, right? So they were the only two countries who signed the deal in 1967. Since then, there have been no common framework. I go back to what Ayumi was saying, tech diplomacy, diplomacy for tech. I think that's where we need her help to fix some of the things. So the space laws are irrelevant now. There's a gap between what we understand from common heritage of mankind and what do we want to do in terms of commercial space resource utilization. So common heritage of mankind, as you might know, where we agree, for example, Antarctica has to be used for the common mankind, right? Or the bed of ocean. But right now, some of the countries like Luxembourg, USA, they have even released some of the commercial laws because they think we need to be innovative, and they are not wrong. So where's the balance between what do we want to do in terms of exploiting the resources or using it for the earth? The climate apartheid, right? So if the data is controlled by very few people, you see what is happening in the US. I was watching the news this morning, the two guys fighting in the US and how much dependent we are in terms of data from, data just being with few people. What if that happens also again for climate issues? So as from my favorite movie, they say with power comes responsibility, with exponential power comes exponential responsibility. But it's not that sad, right? So it's not, I thought I would be saying that this is the tragedy of commons or cosmic commons, but we can flip the story. We can flip the script. How? We can convert this into a promise. There could be multiple ways, and I was thinking about coming up with potential ways of thinking, but it could be built on. I picked up a couple of characteristics of Space 5.0 or space industry. Space industry is anticipatory, right? So we have 807 petabytes of Earth observation data available for us to analyze and come up with anticipatory predictions like climate, flooding, what's happening, even in fashion industry that we can discuss later on. The ethical part of it, China is working on launching supercomputer connected supercomputer in the orbit, so satellites being launched, which are connected through AI. That's great, but how do we make sure that we are transparent and it is used for everyone? Where is the geopolitical alignment? Inclusiveness, that's where I feel most confident. The cost to go to the space has been going down, so even 60 times now, which is helping the global south to launch their own space initiatives. But we need to take it further in a way that these three, this Venn diagram that you see, they need to overlap at some point. And that's where we can try to not repeat the mistakes that we have already done on terrestrial perfect, right? So the way we talk about space 5.0 to improve the scenarios on Earth, let's not just take our problems from Earth to the space. We should fix the problems right now. So this raises some big questions. Of course, I do not have answers to it, but just wanted to trigger some thoughts. Can space 5.0 become Earth's climate nervous system? What if the satellite intelligence became a public good for everyone of us to use and work and help each other? Who will shape the orbital economy? What kind of structure will come up, right? Do we need United Nations or even a further different kind of governance system to manage it? And what if space becomes the most collaborative marketplace covered by both innovation and also the need for sustainability? And how do we ensure the breakthrough ideas powered by AI, new space, blockchain, and human imagination reach to the orbit and also connect to the Earth? The opportunity is cosmic, but also is the responsibility. Because the message here is that we can be innovative, But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are sustainable for a longer period of time. So with this, I would like to bring back the picture, but this time, this pale blue planet is shining, because I'm hoping that we all can start this conversation, right? So every single question that we ask, even if we are not a space expert, even I'm not, right? But the knowledge that you have in your own industries can be taken forward by asking right questions and then resolving. So the cosmos is not just watching us, it's waiting for us to take actions. With this, I'll leave the floor, and hopefully we can have engaging discussions and do something about Space 5.0. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Java, as usual, you want to give me that?
Thank you.
So this is the QR code of your LinkedIn, right? The LinkedIn profile, yes. Okay, I keep it on the screen for everyone to try to connect. So thank you very much, Bharat. So that was a fascinating conversation. Bharat every year comes and brings the novelty from the space, and this time on Space 5.0 and the new emerging futures of industries and economies and markets that we are going to build with space, within space, and of course, helping through the space for Earth. So thank you, Bharat. So now the conversation goes on, but now we're going to switch to another topic, from Web3 and decentralized autonomous organizations to integrative value ecosystems of Finance 5.0, which I briefly presented before. Now we are going to have experts sharing their insight on the matter. So exponential innovation for empowering the integrative value ecosystems of the future, in which we have the physical, biological, and the digital realms interconnected to each other and constantly exchanging value as a means of autonomous survival, adaptation, and governance. So in these futures that are coming forward across industries and societies and markets as we see, finance has a complete different meaning. It's no more about financial transactions and traditional finance as we know it. It will encompass that one, but of course, it's much more than that. We need to have solutions and systems that will allow us to have autonomous transactions, adaptive systems, anticipatory governance, all of them embedded into one integrative value ecosystem with all industries, sectors, and societies connected there. So please join me and welcome Erica on the stage. She just came to Paris. She just arrived 1 hour ago to be with us here today. Thank you very much, Erica. Thank you.
Two hands.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't bring the other one?
Let's see. So this goes forward, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon. I hear we have people following us from all over the world, so thanks for inviting me to join you today. As we accelerate towards digitally empowered and responsibly governed futures, one question sits at the core of this transformation. What if the same passionate communities that create culture from the ground up, supporter groups, creative networks, youth leaders, are the ones that will actually architect our financial system? I'm Erica Wick-Sneed, and I've spent years building Web3 at the world's most iconic brand, Adidas, after I launched crypto inside the PayPal app. I also helped to legitimize the gig economy at Uber, and prior to that, I helped make payments seamless across Google's Rails. I've seen firsthand how it's actually communities, not top-down structures, that reshape the financial systems. Let me tell you about a moment I realized communities could actually own the value they create. In January of 2022, I watched 3,000 people from all over the world, not investors, not VCs, just regular folks. They all became co-owners of a piece of fashion history through the Prada Renylon project that we did with Adidas and digital artist Zach Lieberman. 3,000 members of our community co-created this digital piece of fine art. Every square is a user-generated selfie, which we turned into an NFT for them to hold in their own individual wallets that then was crafted into this final piece of artwork and auctioned off for sale. All 3,000 participants got stake in the sale of this piece that went to auction, and this will continue forever in perpetuity. Here's what got a lot of the media pickup and the press pickup. We flipped the script. Instead of brands extracting value from the communities, we gave them ownership, and this is real ownership. Every person who uploaded a photo to participate in the program didn't just get a thank you email. They got an NFT with perpetual royalties that went directly to their smart wallets. When that collaborative piece of artwork sold at auction, and it did, they got paid, and it will happen again and again forever because it's enshrined in code on blockchain. That's what I mean by communities as engines of regenerative finance. It's not theoretical. I've seen it work. This is Finance 5.0 in action. Value flowing from community creativity directly to planetary impact. And here's the kicker. 80% of the proceeds didn't go to Adidas or to Prada. This was a marketing activation to help us drive sell-through and get free earned media of our apparel launch. What we did was make sure that the funds went directly to Slow Factory, and Slow Factory is a 501(c) nonprofit that's focused on climate change. We literally turned community creativity into climate action funding. This wasn't about NFTs, and this wasn't about hype or fashion. This was about proving that when you give communities real governance and not governance theater, over the value they create through DAOs, through smart contracts, and through transparent revenue sharing, the magic can happen. They don't just participate, they build. And they don't just consume, they regenerate. So imagine this. Instead of thinking about circularity in the old systems with Finance 1.0, think of it as engines of regenerative finance. Finance 5.0 in action means the value should flow from community creativity on credible rails of technology, and in this instance, we used a partner like Polygon, so there were no gas fees, and it had a very low impact on the environment. We focused on a charity as well as an auction house, so everything from end to end went directly into planetary impact. So what if the next limited edition team kit or sneaker drop required proof of impact rather than proof of purchase? Instead of bots and resellers going to the .com page, or those people that are going to flip the sneaker for thousands of dollars on StockX, what if you cut them out of the process and cut out the middleman and went directly to the communities? And instead, if you wanted to get the right consumers to purchase your product, you asked them to show us how you cleaned up your local basketball court. And that's the power of Web3. It embeds ethics and your values into the code. It makes trust verifiable and purpose quantifiable. This is the infrastructure that Finance 5.0 needs. So here's how it works, and we've done this before. Local community leaders can become verifiers, and they're already there. They could be rec center directors, trusted players, your partners. They could be coaches. They could confirm on-chain that, yes, these fans did indeed show up, and yes, they did help transform the court. Smart contracts could see the verification, and then boom, exclusive access could be unlocked to fans. No expensive audits, no corporate oversight, just neighbors vouching for neighbors, with blockchain making it bulletproof. We're not asking fans to prove loyalty with their wallets or their past purchases. We're asking them to prove it with their work, with their participation. Every hype drop could become a community cleanup moment. The jersey becomes more than just merchandise. It's a badge, a signal that says, I showed up for my neighborhood. Let me tell you about a time when we united Web3 tribes and accidentally created a global verification system. We brought together the very famous Bored Ape Yacht Club and Pixel Vault communities. Normally, they're very separate worlds with their own separate ecosystem, but they came together for an Adidas drop. 30,000 NFT holders were minted, and we allowed all 30,000 of them to come to a bespoke website that we built to redeem that NFT for a custom tracksuit, these neon yellow tracksuits that you can see in the image. Now, we manufactured the tracksuits after redemption. so we could have a manufacturing size run that matched the community's needs, not the other way around. And that is very unique in the world of fashion. We created integrative value ecosystem at scale, not only for manufacturing, but also for distribution, because we had to ship these worldwide. This is what Industry 5.0 envisions, not just financial value, but social, cultural, and human value, all interconnected. Here's where things started to get really wild, and we actually didn't foresee this ourselves. Those tracksuits became walking membership cards. Suddenly at events like NFT Paris, NFT New York, anywhere in the world, and it would happen on trains, planes, restaurants, you'd see the tracksuit and know immediately, that's family. No QR codes, no apps to open, just instant recognition. One tracksuit in Bangkok could connect with another in Berlin. What started as merchandise became infrastructure. We created a decentralized, global, self-organizing network of cultural creators who could recognize and empower each other from anywhere on Earth. And these images I'm providing are non-Adidas sanctioned events. These were funded by the community. It was free media, free reach, all on behalf of the brand. Yeah, this slide looked really good when I submitted it, but there's 4 key principles that required some paradigm shifts, and these are mindset shifts, but they also challenge the business, how they think about, let's say, marketing models today and go-to-market models today. You need to start thinking, if you're going to engage with Finance 5.0, as influencers becoming partners. Your audience needs to become your fans. The consumers need to become collaborators. And you go from unlocking access to gating exclusivity through belonging and active participation. The question is no longer whether these integrative value ecosystems will be reshaping finance. The question is, will we go fast enough? Will we dream big enough? Will we put the technology behind the curtain? Will we make it accessible, fun, easy for people to participate with? Finance 5.0 isn't coming. It's here, and it's a living prototype, emerging from culture, powered by technology, but grounded in community. And the greatest changes and the greatest businesses always require a cultural movement powered by communities who actively participate. The tools exist, the communities are ready. The only question is, are you? If you want to check out some of the work that we've done and get inspired by some of the other case studies, because Adidas has been working in Web3 for over 4 years now, you can check out my LinkedIn, you can contact me, and I just invite you all to join me on the future of Finance 5.0. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you very much, Erica, for the fantastic discussion and questions that you raised, and that was the objective. So Erica talked about Web3, blockchain, of course, as a technology behind, and the role of DAOs in organizing such innovations that are grounded in communities and cultures and societies. And now we are going to have Alex Maza with us, the head of sustainability and innovation of Cardano Foundation, to share his insight from an institutional perspective on the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saman, and everybody. So you'll forgive my slides. I put them together really quickly. But what I'll be speaking about broadly is not how the private sector and its communities can go towards blockchain, but rather how blockchains as digital nations can go towards the UN, humanitarian organizations, all that kind of stuff. So I studied not to do tech, I studied to be in the humanitarian and international development space. And I'm doing tech now. But I get to speak to the UN on a weekly basis and work on projects with them across staking, if you know what that is, or building accelerators, producing concepts, pilots for the implementation of blockchain, either for humanitarian causes or the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals. So right now, what you have on screen are according to DeFi Llama, the top 20 blockchain protocol treasuries. So cumulatively, they have today about $11 billion worth of capital. And they use this capital to drive the adoption of these blockchain technologies, to maintain the infrastructure, and to also drive use cases that are pretty diverse. This is a small number. It's an emerging technology. It's nothing near what you have with established corporates, but it is capital and it can be deployed. Out of all of these protocols, most of these are what are called Ethereum layer 2s, but there are a few layer 1s. And what a layer 1 is, in very simple terms, is the base blockchain upon which everything else is built. There are only 2 layer 1s in existence right now that have full on-chain governance. Now, what does that mean? When you use your MacBook or whatever computer uses Windows, you don't get much of a say about the updates that are pushed. You just click update. For blockchain protocol, decentralized, distributed ledger technology to update, a decision must be made. This can be done in a centralized manner, which is potentially pressurable by single parties. And we've heard why AI and other exponential technologies require some level of decentralization and sharing of power. And so Cardano and Polkadot are 2 L1s that need to find ways to update themselves. To update themselves in a much more decentralized manner. What that means is they need to be able to get the entire network to say, yes, we move forward with this particular upgrade. They can also say, this is how we want the network to operate. In the same way that maybe in your daily lives, you have people that are in your National Assembly or your Parliament deciding, this is how we want the tax rate to look like, the VAT. And they also need to make a decision regarding budget, like your parliamentarians. And both of these L1s have a treasury. Now, I'm not going to comment much on Polkadot because I'm not an expert there, but I do work with Cardano on a daily basis. But before I go into that, if you're familiar with blockchain technologies, can I just get like a hand up? Do you know what this is? Okay, so this is called the scalability trilemma. So with any distributed ledger technology, there are trade-offs between 3 properties: scalability, security, and decentralization. And right now, no blockchain has yet solved this. Some of them are getting close to being absolutely scalable and secure. Others are very close to being secure and decentralized, but none of them have yet to get to there. When we speak about DAOs, we speak about decentralized, autonomous organizations. But are DAOs really decentralized? Are they really autonomous? Are they really organized? And the reality is they have choices to make. In the same way that we have choices to make as citizens of a particular country, as shareholders of a particular company, we have power and we have decision-making power. And for some reason, we haven't figured that out yet as humans. And we're trying to figure that out in Web3 and to try to create a little bit more trustlessness, but we're not there yet. So for Cardano, we have an on-chain treasury of about $1.2 billion. And we had a 2024 inflow of approximately $225 million. The way that inflows come in is the same way that your taxes feed your nation state. So the taxes from last year are approximately 225 million. And we've decided as an ecosystem, in a very convoluted and boring way, which I will not bore you with the details, that we're going to spend that exact amount of inflows as outflows into the ecosystem. Now, how do we as a decentralized autonomous organization, one that tries to be, allocate this capital on a yearly basis? One of the first instances of this is called Project Catalyst. So Project Catalyst is the world's largest decentralized innovation fund. where if you notice the little A, that's A for Ada, the name of the Cardano cryptocurrency, named after Ada Lovelace, who was the first computer programmer. And approximately $200 million over 4 years have been allocated to a variety of projects that were sourced from the bottom up across a number of different geographies. And that funded close to 2,000 projects. And the way that they're funded is essentially people have different categories of challenges to respond to. They respond to them. And then depending on how much ADA, so how much stake, how much voting power you have more or less influence than others to decide the outcome of what gets voted through. Similarly to what happens in today's parliaments. Now, what you'll see here is that projects were developed over different types of industry groups. The one that I typically like to look at is sustainability. And for some reason, it's a tiny little share, and I'd like to see that go bigger. That's 10% or 9% of what's been spent by our ecosystem. It builds different things related to governance, to identity, to smart contracts and real-world applications. And if you have an idea that you'd like to explore with blockchain, feel free to look for Project Catalyst. But then what we really have as an issue is, instead of spending $200 million in 4 years, we need to figure out how to spend $200 million in 1 year and do that again and again and make sure that the infrastructure of Cardano as a digital nation is secure. And what we have are what I'd like to call coordination layers, not DAOs, coordination layers. These are groups of individuals, groups of organizations that have one common thematic interest and that try to get together to find the adequate resourcing of this output that they're seeking. Maybe you could think of them as bottom-up ministries. So instead of having a ministry of X, another ministry of Y, you have a bunch of people with a specific bit of knowledge that come together and then make it easier to get the financial and the technical resources for what they do. These are a bunch of names. They don't really mean much to you. Maybe Project Catalyst does, because I've just explained what that is. But Pragma, for example, brings together open source experts in order to build the open source tooling that's required for the network to be developed. Project Catalyst is an innovation fund. Intersect is essentially the forum through which people are creating the governance structures that exist on Cardano. And so one of the things that I do on a daily basis is speak to the United Nations. And as you know, the US has cut over 90% of its aid. So have most European partners. And right now, what is happening in the UN is that there are cuts everywhere. One of the first things that is cut is innovation. One of the things that I'm looking into right now, and whether this is possible, is can we create a coordination layer for UN agencies to be able to continue their exploration and their innovation with digital technologies through blockchain treasuries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for sharing the institutional side of the story and how technology is powering up the innovation ecosystems and how it's orchestrating the Finance 5.0 integrative value ecosystems. So we are going to elaborate much more in details with all the speakers, of course, after the break in the roundtable. But before that, we are going to talk about Fashion 5.0 and reinvention of cluster competitiveness dynamics. So this is a work that we are doing at ReTech Center of École de Ponts Business School with the Harvard Microeconomics of Competitiveness affiliate network, in which we are working on the research side of this, and then across the other labs also we elaborate and we advance the work. But the idea is to understand what are the main pillars that are driving cluster competitiveness of the fashion industry. But before that, what is Fashion 5.0 and how the responsible transition powered up by technology is already reshaping the industry? What are the gaps and opportunities for innovators, investors, executives, and decision makers. So the next speaker that I'm going to invite to the stage, you might know him already. He's a fantastic friend of all of us at the school, and he's a senior fellow at ReTech Center. Professor Simone Cipriani is here with us. Please welcome me on the stage. Thank you very much. So, Professor Simone Cipriani is a doctoral candidate at the École de Ponts Business School, a senior fellow at ReTech Center, with more than 25 years of experience at the UN, having started, launched, developed, coordinated, managed, and supervised fantastic projects across the UN, globally, internationally, on ethical fashion, on supply chain, value chain management, and he is a gem, and we are very lucky to have him here with us today to share his insight on Fashion 5.0. Please, Simone, grazie.
I didn't know to be a gem, and
Oh,
now I know. I'm very happy. I worked in jewelry also in my fashion journey, so I'll go back to those producers. They were Tuareg producers in Mali, in the Sahel, and I will tell them, you didn't know it. I am a gem. You should have treated me better, but they were very, very good producers. Well, I don't know much what to say on this, but you provoked me many times on Fashion 5.0, Industry 5.0, and the cluster dimension in Italy, where I come from, because I left the UN and I got back into my home country in Italy, and I spent a lot of time in Paris here, working with Saman. In Italy, I work as the Dean of the Milano Fashion Institute, which is the business school of the Italian Fashion Council that is connected to ReTech Center, with which we are preparing an innovative program. Now, first of all, the technological enablers of this Industry 5.0, we spoke in these days about digital twins and tokenization and all these things. We know that these are extremely important also for the fashion industry. They make traceability possible. They make due diligence possible because you are in control of what happens. You have a model against which you check discrepancies with digital twins. Then tokenization is the backbone of traceability. And this is all very good. Product development and production processes can be managed in a more efficient way. But there is a first caveat, a first word of warning. You need to have the human factor properly accounted for in the digital twin. If you use digital twins to monitor production and to set performance standards in production, you've got to get your human factor in a proper way. Otherwise, this system becomes a system to set very tough tasks, impossible tasks for people in production lines. It becomes a super controlled system, especially if you adopt the Internet of Things and this kind of technology and you put them on the garments of the workers and so on. So first point, first word of warning. This is very important, this is very good, but the human factor must be properly accounted for in digital twins. Then there is another element, there is another promise of Industry 5.0, which is the promise of personalization. Personalization, we can personalize garments. You know, when you have a digital twin, you can check how fabric is on you, and you can check how it reacts when you walk, and this and that. Personalization is possible. Yes, it is. Again, a word of warning. There are economies of scale. It's not that I want this jacket personalized, that I can do all my simulations and then I can get it produced, because fabric requires to be produced and you need a scale at which you produce fabric to be economically viable, and then you need a scale to produce the jackets, and then you need a scale to produce that. Maybe the promise of Industry 5.0 is more towards mass customization. You have a library of possibilities, and the consumer can choose among different possibilities, but the scale is there. Applying all this to the clusters, as Saman wants me to do, is very severe with me. I tell you, you have to follow my indications. So, clusters, I come from a country of clusters. There's a guy up there who is a doctoral candidate, PhD student who is from Prato, the most formidable cluster in textile in the world, as a homage to you. Italy is full of clusters engaged in the fashion industry. 75% of luxury productions in fashion all over the world are made in Italy, in these clusters. Clusters are cultural ecosystems that reactivate tradition, especially as regards raw materials. You know, the tradition in Italy is to have all these materials, cashmere and silk and this and that produced. You now have a lot of climate resistant materials. You have a lot of materials based on new fibers, on fibers that they are the outcome of regenerative processes, mycelium-based materials, and this and that, plant-based leather, and this and that. An example is exactly the cluster of Prato, which was based on, which started in the 50s as a place where garments from the US, wool garments, were recycled, regenerated and recycled, and which today has developed a technology to recycle shirts and all these kind of cotton and polyester materials without using water. That's very important because using water is, as there is polyester, there is the problem of microplastics that get into water effluents and get into the rivers and so on. They do it without using water. It's a big piece of innovation, which is very relevant also for some countries in Africa where a lot of textile waste is dumped. I personally brokered an agreement between a company in Kenya, Africa Collect Textile, and the owners of this technology in Prato to set up a similar plant there. It doesn't make use of water. It makes a huge use of electricity, so solar installations and all the rest. Again, the human factor is again extremely important, and the environmental factor, to the point that if we think about an evolution of these clusters in a scenario of Industry 5.0, given what I have just said, you think about putting down, you think about, of course, new infrastructure, digital infrastructure. The investment in digital infrastructure is paramount, va bene, but then human factor, you need to have proper educational hubs. And educational hubs for Industry 5.0 and the industry of fashion in the clusters of Italy of luxury fashion is not simply a business school or a big institution with big programs, but these are hubs that are rooted in the local reality of the clusters, of the human reality of the clusters, the technological reality of the clusters, that they enable people in the clusters to make use of these technological enablers and to evolve in their reactivation of tradition. I see a scenario when I dream in the night. I always dream about ReTech and these things, and my wife says you are mad. And what I dream is that we have an office with the business school of the École de Ponts and with the Milano Fashion Institute in every main cluster, where in real time we are able to provide a library of online courses, synchronous, asynchronous, on these themes, these technological enablers related to Industry 5.0. And then the final point, we always say that Industry 5.0 is human-centric. There's a lot of buzzwords in this, no? Whenever there is a paradigm, human-centric, this, that, what does it mean? I tell you something. In a recent discussion with the CEO of an important fashion brand in Italy, I asked the guy, what are the main topics for education if you need to invest in your workforce and to have a partnership with our business school? What do you want us to teach to your staff? What are the first priorities? And I was expecting artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and this and that. And the guy told me soft skills, human skills. The world is globalized. The fashion industry is globalized. Even in Italy, in the brands, you may work with a huge amount of diversity, people from all over the world in the same company with completely different backgrounds. You have technical engineers for production, you have digital engineers, then you have production people, then you have materials, then you have designers, then you have creatives, then you have communication people. Getting together humanly is extremely important. Soft skills are more important than ever. And I leave you in this place of technology and big engineers with this message. Do not overlook soft skills.
Thank you very much. Of course.
Can I say something? So this, you see me as I am dressed. I have 2 shades of blue and a pale blue. Why am I dressed like this? What kind of fashion statement is it? It's that I woke up this morning, I was very sleepy, and I put on the trousers of a suit and the jacket of another suit. But when I arrived here, some of the collaborators of Saman told me, how so daring, this fashion statement. Fashion, sometimes it's also a bit of a story.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simone. So we have had the honor of having Simone several times here on this stage and also on many online events that we do, always on the topic of Fashion 5.0. So Simone is the Dean of Milano Fashion Institute, which is the business school of Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana, which is the owner of Milano Fashion Week. And we have the honor of having Simone, of course, as a senior fellow at ReTech Center, but also the president of the Camera Moda, on the chair of governance of Fashion 5.0 at ReTech Center, alongside with Simone, with Pascal Morand from the French system equivalent, and many more leaders of the industry to help us advance skills, research, innovation, and engagement across the RISE labs in the fashion industry with industry leaders. So we're really lucky to have Simone and the support of his school and Camera Moda, of course. So we are going to hear more from Simone on the roundtable, of course, but for now, we have the final topic of the Ignite talks or the flash pitches that we have. The topic is on governance 5.0. Technically bringing everything together from agentic, tokenized, and cognitive infrastructures, from smart cities to cognitive cities, the topic that we also explored last year at our annual conference. But this year, we are going to bring back Teddy with us, who's joining me on the stage. Yes. Teddy is also a doctoral candidate of our program of EDBA. He's also a fellow at ReTech Center, a very good friend of the school and our programs. And these topics that we are discussing, of course, as you know, these are the specialization tracks of our Specialized Executive MBA, Specialized Executive DBA, and many more programs that we have launched at ReTech Center with the community. Like Erica was presenting, it's really a responsible model for all the business schools that none of them have yet dared to do it, but we have done it at the École de Ponts Business School proudly to bring our participants and graduates together to co-build and co-develop solutions for the emerging futures. So with Teddy, we are going to explore cognitive spaces to cognitive cities. The floor is yours, Teddy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the microphone.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening. I don't know from where you're watching. I'm Teddy, and super excited to be here with you. So you have seen a lot of things, okay? You've heard about AI, blockchain, cryptography, all of these things. Now we will try to break it down into practical use cases, how this will impact our daily lives as citizens, as workers, and everything we do for our daily activities. So it's not about the tech, because the technology, what is it? It is a tool. Technology are tools. The way we use it, the usage we make of it is the most important thing, okay? So, and when we look at all of this new tech stack, emerging tech from blockchain to AI, connectivity, and so on, which is the base ground for Industry 5.0, everything is converging but together. And when it's converged, this is what it enables a new type of governance as well. Okay, and AI is definitely the jewel on the top of the crown. In the context of infrastructure on a daily basis, the technology can be applied for different purposes. And one of these is traffic. Okay, so we can imagine that AI is actually the one tool regulating our traffic, sensors, camera, and all of this, which means that the volume of data which is being captured on a daily basis is tremendous. Who owns this data? You can be driving on the road and your data is not yours. Where you're going, what you're doing, the way you drive your car, and all of these things. So there's a matter of privacy, ethics, and governance as well. And the machine is the one ruling all of this. And as AI is being infused into our, let's say, environment, okay? Imagine that if this room is connected, we still live in analog. And as Industry 5.0 and a new type of governance is how do we manage our environment? The physical, the biological, and the digital. Everything comes together, the infrastructure, through the lens of connectivity, sensors, and artificial intelligence. Our senses, you and I, as human, biological human, cannot go beyond the machine. Why? Because our eyes can see a certain spectrum of light. Okay, our ears can just hear a certain frequency of sound, but the machine can go through the walls to the machine and capture way more data than we can do as human. Which means that if there is a Neo, just like in the Matrix, it might be the machine, but not us. Or maybe an augmented human, which is another story, and we'll come back to it as well. In that case, if the machine can capture more data that we can do, and if the machine, in the context of a smart environment, a living system, a smart infrastructure, can capture all the data around us of our direct environment, it means that the machine can literally, I'm looking for the right word, right, to not freak you off, can predict what will happen and what we can do based on historical data and how it gets processed. This is the concept of the oracle. And this concept is developed in many, many projects, including the most prominent one, smart cities. So if all the information happening in the city is governed, is captured and governed by the machine, by the data, the machine is literally capturing the data from the human, from the nature, biology, from the infrastructure. So the digital become the glue to modelize the real world. your personal data, my personal data, our personal data, and the data of our environment and infrastructure. All comes into one. So the matter of governance is very, very important. It is crucial, actually, because once every element of the ecosystem, because an agent of the system participating in the governance of the system, who sits on top? Who manage everything? Do you own your own personal data? Or do you don't? This is a real question. How do you apply your citizenship's right in a world which is a combination of biological, physical, and digital? In the physical world, it's in some regions of the world, there is no human rights, for instance. I come from the global south, Africa. There are certain countries under dictatorship for decades. Human rights is just a fancy word for the UN, but in the reality on some countries of the global south, for some the population, it's a dream, which is not even there yet. So certain people cannot exercise their rights in the real world. Do you think they're able to exercise the right in the digital space, in the digital realm? Impossible. So it's like being harvested in real life and being harvested, secondly, in the digital space as well. And this is something that Ayumi was mentioned when she was talking about tech diplomacy and the growing power of the largest conglomerate of this planet. So if those companies are the ones who are capturing our data, they have the power of nation states. And in the concept of smart cities and cognitive cities, this becomes crucial. We have such projects as NEOM, but there are many, many, many projects across the globe because every, let's say, big country or big tech players, just like Tencent in China, they are working on this concept of smart cities. Because we still live in an analog world, even though we are using digital tools. The next step is how do we leverage digital to enhance the real world? This is the future for all of us. And it's not so far-fetched. So don't think NEOM is a dream. I was there in last December. It's just amazing. So when you see it on TV, when you heard in the news, it's different when you actually go there and see what is going on. The surface of this project is the size of a small European country. Small. I'm talking about size, okay? Because no country is small. It's the size of Belgium. Can you imagine that? So they are literally excavating a whole region the size of Belgium. They're building it. And that might become the future for all of us. So we have to pay close attention to what is being built and how this is impacting the social construct and how we will operate as a society and how we will, let's say, exercise our citizenship rights in the smart cities concept, which are basically becoming cognitive cities. Why? Because smart is the infrastructure which is intelligent. Cognitive, it's when the biological, the physical, and the digital converge into one. And this is where we are heading. So I'm a practitioner. I'm running a consultancy management firm, boutique, and we advise corporations and government agencies on these systems, living systems. So to be more practical, because those are concepts, okay? Let's get down to something very more tangible. We have developed a concept which is called CogSpace. What is CogSpace? Cognitive space. CogSpace for cognitive space. How can we leverage emerging tech to turn any kind of space from the urban ecosystem, from a neighborhood to a building, to a meeting room, to your bedroom, into a cognitive space, an intelligent one? Think about when we turn infrastructure and the physical space into a living organism somehow through the medium of the technology. Giving this room, for instance, eye, ears, and senses through sensors, IoT, cameras, and so on. This is the concept of the Cogspace. We are working on a project with a national country, a government agency in North Africa. I cannot say the name, but of how can we use this concept of the Cogspace to improve public services in the sense of the welcoming of the citizens when they are going into an administration to fill form and follow up their administrative paperwork and so on. And we come to the concept of a totem, which is like a member of the staff. It's not about replacing the human, it's about how can we use the technology to make sure to ease the process. It's just like going to an administration to get your driver license. So instead of talking to a person, you're talking to an AI agent that will drive you to the whole process until you receive your driving license. Okay? So there's a totem, there's the concept of how in the waiting room, instead of just sitting and waiting for your turn to go and meet with an agent or a staff member, the seat in itself is an intelligent bench or desk or chair or whatever that can communicate with you and that can walk you through any questions you might have. So we turn this whole space into an agent in itself. But it's not an agent which is there to control you. It's an agent which is there to help you in your administrative initiative, okay? Based on data, infrastructure, blockchain for authentication, and AI, of course, for intelligence. This also could be applied for immersive learning. How can we make sure that we raise up the human capital of the people working on the public services agencies, but also for workers? We know that being in the context of doing something, it's way more important than just reading in the books. So what if we immerse you into the practice, into the training in itself? So all of these concepts can be applied to any kind of environment, from the work to the public administration and into your residential areas as well. We live in a connected world now, and the world is at the fingertip. And how the technology is advancing, we are conquering space, just as we have seen with Dr. Bharat. The planet as an extension now. We are not just, let's say, stuck on the ground. Extension are the satellites. The extension are space. I think that last year we have a number of 6,000 SpaceX satellites, a private company, which is occupying, let's say, a territory on Earth, but beyond Earth. I think that within the next 2 years, but they plan to have 10,000. So this is becoming very critical. We have cars now that can jump and just drive by themselves. Who is governing those cars? What is the responsibility if there is an accident, there's a crash or whatever? It's really important. And when you get into those cars, are you the driver? Are you responsible? Or the car is the one being responsible? What if it is your car? So everything we're doing, and this is a personal message coming from the Global South as well, it's not just about money. There is more to it. It's how do we use technology? How do we leverage it to solve the most pressing global challenges, such as climate change, poverty, social justice? Because we can talk about Industry 5.0, Governance 5.0, agentic AI governance and all of this, but it all comes down to the people. And this is what Professor Simone was saying. And this is the core principle of Industry 5.0, responsible and digital enabled future for industries. because we just have one planet, and we have to make sure that we leave a legacy for the future generations. And this is what it's about. Because all the things we are building, all the expertise we are developing is just for one thing. What will be left when we will be gone? I don't know for you. I have 7 kids, and I want to make sure to contribute for a better future for them. Not just to give them the financial resources to achieve all of their dreams, but to make sure that when I will be gone, at least I would have done my best to make the world a better place. My name is Teddy Wakasumba, formerly known as Pahagbia, getting back to my roots. So I'm getting back my real authentic name, which is this one. And I'm a senior fellow at the ReTech Center and a doctorate graduate at École des Ponts Business School. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Teddy, and thanks to all the speakers, participants, graduate professors that we have here, supervisors that we have here in the room and also online, those who have joined us. So now, without further ado, we are going to take a break, and the break will absorb the slight delay that we had in starting. So we're going to resume back at 5:15 p.m. Paris time, where we are going to bring all these speakers together, the concepts, the ideas that they shared, to bring them together and contextualize the conversations. So please enjoy the break here, and those who are online, come back with us at 5:15. Thank you very much.
I thought we finished at 6, but
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are back for the roundtable. And for this roundtable, let me find the clicker. We have everyone with us, all the speakers who gave their flash pitches and the quick introductions to the concepts that we discussed. I think the slides are not live on my side. Our team is going to help us with that. Okay, so, all right, sorry, we have to, all right. So this was when we said, thank you, let's go for the break. And here we are with all the speakers and dear friends and fellows that we have here to have a conversation, to interconnect the topics that we discussed, and also to take questions, of course, from the audience here and online. So without further ado, I'm going to share the questions on the slides here on the screen, and we are going to have a conversation about these questions with our panelists. So before we start, thank you very much for the first session, and looking forward to this second one. So what roles do tokenization, digital twins, and AI-driven personalization play in rethinking transparency, identity, and scalability in the Fashion 5.0? I guess this is exactly what Simone also, you referred to personalization, and we heard about the role of tokenization, and you also mentioned it. You also mentioned digital twins. So tell us more a bit how they can help us with transparency, identity, and scalability, since you mentioned also scalability as of the challenges. How do you see the role of these technologies in helping us?
yeah, I will. Is it on? Yes.
Yes.
I will reply with reference to a few key points in the debate on sustainability in the industry today. One is due diligence. Due diligence, sustainability due diligence is a huge debate. There's a very big lobbying movement across all industries in Europe on due diligence and on reducing the demand of due diligence, even in the European legislation. The omnibus regulation, European omnibus regulation, has a bit diluted the demands of due diligence, of sustainability due diligence, and so on. These technologies, the digital token, digital twins, tokenization, and so on, make due diligence possible and quite straightforward. Because you have on one side the backbone of traceability with tokenization, but on the other side, you have a simulation, a model, a digital one, against which you can track your performance. So that is the point on due diligence. What this makes clear, in my opinion, is that the point on due diligence today is not a problem of corporate structure, of tools and this and that. It's a problem of business model. As long as the business model of this industry is a linear business model, and as long as it is designed to create exclusively a shareholder's value, which is financial value, and not also stakeholder value, which is value also for people, society, and the planet, due diligence is a problem. But due diligence is possible and becomes a regular management practice in a business model that is centered on creating stakeholder value. The other point I wanted to make is on circularity. The circularity rate of this industry is extremely low. Extremely low, even in the luxury industry and so on. We speak a lot using the dead stocks and this, but it's extremely low. Digital tokens enable circularity because they travel with products and they make resale, repair, recycling all traceable. These are all elements of Industry 5.0 that are really aligned with the promise of this paradigm to to enable the industry to achieve at different levels, as we say today, of corporate sustainability. The last point is on personalization, but I already spoke about that. I see this more as mass customization.
Thank you very much. Please.
Saying about due diligence, and I wanted to break it down into a way that I've been speaking about it at like a consumer brand to really bring it home. Tokenization allows a brand to establish proof of ownership and proof of participation. So if you think about it like that, if you tokenize this pair of shoes, maybe there's an RFID chip that then connects to an NFT and you go through a connection process during the unboxing moment. Now on chain, it verifies that I am the owner of this. You can do that for your end user during the unboxing moment, but you can also have that RFID chip, and there's technology that's weaves threads into verifiable ways that you can prove that this jacket is made by this supplier with this leather provider with this type of dye process, so that you can actually build it in the entire end-to-end supply chain. So that's, to me, is what's really powerful about tokenization. We already see policymakers pushing digital wallets and pushing that mass adoption that brands are having to get ready for now and figure out how are we going to take what's being forced on us and turn it into a value proposition for end users. And so I ground this concept in proof of ownership. And then if there's a lot of words in here, it's almost like a soup. But if you take all those different words and you lay them out in a go-to-market strategy, you can see how AI personalization might come into the opportunity of design. Maybe there's a pre-order moment, and so it allows someone to choose different colors or a different size specific for them. And maybe there's going to be a digital twin that gets to them as well, because especially Gen Z, they want to express themselves not only in the physical world, but they want to express themselves in their virtual worlds where their friends show up, whether that's Roblox or Fortnite or whatnot. It does also allow brands to participate in the resale economy. Brands are really good at making money once at the cashier register, but we're really bad at figuring out how to make money on the secondary sales. And so there's a huge market that's propped up like StockX and Depop and eBay. Brands want to get in there. And when something has proof of ownership on chain, anytime that item goes on and gets resold again and again, there can be residual income that brands make, as well as their partners, their suppliers, their collaborators. So those are some of the other opportunities, just to ground it.
Thank you very much. Right in line with the conversation of having the responsible use of technologies, of course, in this example that Erica and Simone both elaborated on. In terms of governance, of course, it's obvious. In terms of reporting and conformity, the support that it brings, this transparency across the supply chain. So that already helps with big challenges of the fashion industry now, and also more to come with the transition to Industry 5.2. And here we see how leveraging technologies for good would exactly address those problems. And not only that, but also engages the community in a more meaningful way, creating economic opportunities, creating parallel economies that are well developed and solid on crypto and blockchain and Web3 and DAOs, solid enough, credible enough to engage the community with them, and also to generate value together with the community and to redistribute the value in a more equal way. Of course, I'm not implying that all the implementations of this technology would lead to equal distribution of value, but that's the ideal that we would work toward for the desirable emerging futures. Alex, if in this point, from an institutional perspective, you would like to share?
I think one of the really interesting aspects around this is maybe what was talked about with due diligence and digital twins is maybe from a regulatory perspective, what's happening in the European Union with digital product passports, which the regulation is about to come into action, and there's a path towards 2030. And while there's no explicit mention of blockchain technology or any forms of decentralized distributed ledger technology, it seems like these kind of technologies would make having a DPP with strong data integrity much more easier, much more trustable. Why? Because you would have a source of truth that is distributed across different nodes that would be very difficult to fake. And in some of the cases that we've seen with high fashion recently, and some of the, let's say, flash media that would pop up on X, were allegations around whether or not high value items were actually high cost, or whether they were low cost, whether they were sourced from low income economies, or whether they were sourced from high income economies and ateliers in France, in the UK and elsewhere. And so having a source of truth that is less difficult to compromise means that brands can actually secure that value in a confident way, rather than relying on hearsay all the way through a supply chain.
Very good. Thank you very much, Alex. Exactly. And it also leads into the conversations that we can open up, of course, in regards to strategy and competitiveness, and of course, branding and storytelling afterwards, sharing the impact and dissemination of the findings. But we keep them maybe for the questions that we get from the public to help us align the conversation based on what you're interested to hear. So thank you very much. So how could Earth observation data help fashion clusters measure and reduce environmental externalities, creating regenerative metrics that support their competitiveness?
Hello.
Bharat, yes.
It's working. I think this is for me, no? So I would have loved to say that it's not a rocket science, but in reality it is. So yes, how can we do this? Just to give a little bit of context, because you just mentioned, Erica, dyeing process and how blockchain can be used to confirm this. I come from a city in India called Jaipur, and some of you might know they have a very famous hand-printed block printing technique from old ages. And I've seen that area dying because of the chemicals that they've been using in the land, right? So one of the ideas that we could use is, because there's huge amount of, as I mentioned in my presentation, huge amount of Earth observation data available. What if you're able to analyze that data and put this into a reporting perspective, live data, to understand how the pollution is impacting the local environment, and you try to report on that? That could be one of the ways to build those metrics where you see how your textiles are impacting the environment. It could also be related to, I think you mentioned amount of water we use and the lack of recyclability and that understanding, at least in that state. Again, it's a dry state, it's a desert state, and the amount of water we waste is also crazy. And I'm sure this is happening in all the other global south regions. That could also be used, because you have those techniques where you can use the Earth observation data to understand the pollution, live pollution metrics in that global region, or the water region. So having those kind of metrics, how much of water per textile being wasted or being polluted, as a part of global governance in the companies, could be one of the interesting ways to look at it. Of course, it has to combine the Earth observation data, the space technology, the blockchain, and the real aspects, real intention to do this. I think we lack intention. The technology is existing. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bharat. Simone, Teddy, anything that comes to your mind that can contribute to the question, don't hesitate. If not, I summarize and we continue, because this exactly to the question also that we had previously, and Simone mentioned the need for changing business modeling as well. That could also be heavily impacted by this. And then here we see the business model innovation, exponential business model innovation, as a means to achieve competitiveness by leveraging the tools, such as you well put together convergence of these technologies, such as AI and blockchain and space technology and Earth observation, and of course a lot of governance measures and community engagement. So thank you very much for that.
May I add something?
Of course,
quickly,
please.
Because I think I missed the part of competitiveness. And we were discussing about your fashion style, and I was telling you that I think you're very fashionable. For me, fashion is my expression, right? So I think people want to express themselves. And if I have an opportunity to trace that what I'm wearing right now is responsible, that I have not created pollution, I think that would be awesome, right? So having those barcodes where I'm able to scan my suit and immediately see that how much pollution or pollution was not created, or did I add something in terms of neutrality of pollution in the water? That would make me feel good, and that would be fashion for me. That could make the brands competitive, right? If they want to come up with this idea. Just saying. Yeah.
Fantastic.
A quick addition, but to that,
Please.
again, the convergence, very powerful, because thanks to this infrastructure, which is both a back-end infrastructure for tracking the supply chain, the tokenization of the participation, a lot of that, but also it's also a front-end infrastructure, because once this is embedded into the digital product passport, then the end user can see where the clothes is coming from, and with the data, how much natural, the resources has been used to, produce all of this data, and that can answer that question, or where is it coming from? Is it clean, or do I relate to the fabrication process of the clothes and of this? So you can use a same layer of infrastructure to serve both the, let's say, the competitiveness of the supply chain, the efficiency of the supply chain, and the competitiveness of the brand as well from a marketing perspective.
Please.
He's a friend, and whenever he speaks, he stimulates my thinking. Yeah, we are in the same class. Yeah, you're right. You're also right. Consumers, yeah, of course, yeah. Consumers, yeah, if a consumer knew that if I knew that this is the outcome of regenerative processes and blah, 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 and I have the possibility to track it and all the rest, it would be fantastic. But it's not to be taken for granted that I would pay more, because this is what happens in the market. Consumers not automatically pay more for sustainable things. But I think that this is a misplaced focus, because it's not consumers who should pay more. It's companies who want to create a different kind of value, who consider this extra cost for sustainability as an investment for the planet and for society. So what we need here is metrics, you have the word metrics in there, to measure the return of this. And these metrics cannot be financial metrics, because it's not always possible. You also need impact metrics and all the rest to show that you have that.
Thank you very much, Simone. This is exactly in line what we just discussed about the integrative value ecosystems and Finance 5.0 conversations, and the need for having different type of measures, metrics, and indicators for performance, for strategy, for impact, for leadership, for governance, for all the topics that we always discuss on risk and readiness matrix. And it's missing, which is a great opportunity that I know that the work that you are doing and our doctoral community is also leading with the MFI and with CNMI. We are addressing this from the literature. And also with the ecosystem and the experts that we have, hopefully we are going to advance this forward. So now maybe Alex, you can tell us about the institutional part, because as we are talking about a new sort of finance in which value systems are completely different, because they include much more responsible pillars, basically.
So I'm going to root this in kind of near-term pragmatism, in the sense that people don't necessarily pay more for goods that are ethical en masse. And the fashion industries and behemoths within it need to still maintain a margin. And usually verifying things at source up a supply chain, regardless of its metals or minerals, textiles, et cetera, it's expensive. It's expensive, and the data that you get further upstream gets more and more dodgy and expensive. As it relates to Earth observation data, this is maybe one of the things that could be used for this, but the reality is high quality Earth observation data is expensive, and low quality is cheap. But the fact is you need high quality data in order to be looking at land degradation in a serious manner, that you could use that data potentially as something that underpins financial products and instruments, whether this be insurance, reinsurance, all along the supply chain. Now, one of the cool projects that I've been working with recently is an open source environmental oracle. Open source in the sense that anybody here that has an idea for a use case could potentially just use it. We're just talking about it now. And it gets me really excited because what it does is it takes an AI rendering algorithm and enables people to turn low quality, cheap Earth observation data into high quality, still cheap Earth observation data. And what that does is it reduces the cost of verification, at least from the stratosphere. Now, the key aspect around this is how can the cost savings that are brought there, how could they be used to positively incentivize the triangulation on the ground, which essentially relies on local communities having a better option than potentially degrading their local land. And so right now, this team is working primarily on farm to fork. So these are agricultural products for food, but this could very well be applied to textiles and other forms of things. But really, it's about reducing the costs. So this is when it comes to that side of things. When it comes to metals and minerals as supply chains, those are also pretty tough. I've looked into this with the Swiss Trading and Shipping Association. We did a short research project. And what we did was focus on gold as a high value, low volume mineral, and tin, which is a low value, high volume mineral. And the one trend that is consistent over time is that the only real traceability we can have, and I'm not talking about diamonds here, metals and minerals, but not diamonds, because those have a specific process called the Kimberley process. Those fungible minerals, what will typically happen there is anywhere upstream from the point of aggregation, which is a refinery, is essentially a black box. And refineries are typically in Switzerland, in the UAE, or in China. 15% of the world's gold is artisanal. Perhaps more of it actually is, but we have no way of knowing this, whether it comes from artisanal miners that are legal and ethical, whether it comes from child labor. And so essentially technology cannot help as much as finding ways to finance positive incentives all the way upstream. So yeah, that's my take, is really trying to find ways to reduce costs as much as possible with technology and perhaps bundle some of these costs into positive economic incentives upstream for people.
Exactly. So that's also where the question of policy and this interconnection and the integrative, sort of perspective comes into the play.
So as it comes to regulation, the EU again is pushing a lot on this, right? And there may be a market that forms itself where, from a regulatory perspective, the cost of compliance might actually push businesses to actually comply with these things and try to bring in these positive incentives upstream. But realistically, at least this is my view, small and medium-sized enterprises are going to struggle to comply because they cannot have compliance departments large corporate groups can. And the cost of complying for large corporate groups is likely to kind of go all the way back upstream, which can also be pretty tough as an investment.
Exactly. With Simone, there's a topic that you also presented in one of the previous conferences here, Nature on the Board of Governance of Fashion 5.0. This is exactly that. And well, the good news is that it can be addressed and worked on, but as you said, technology cannot solve it all. But then other disciplines and industries needs to get engaged, like in smaller scales, but in similar examples such as green steel, for example. We have worked with financial institutions who came together and addressed this, absorbed the green premium, if you like, for the production of steel. And then the reward back for them was technically not only, of course, marketing, branding, not those, but really in terms of engaging the ecosystem in a way that consolidates the industry and also creating shared value across sectors and industries in an innovative way, which is responsible and driven by technology. However, as you said, they're not scalable yet. That's where the opportunities are for looking for more innovation. Thank you very much for your inputs. The next one we have, how do tokenized cultural DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, enable equitable participation and economic empowerment across creative economies like fashion, especially in underrepresented or indigenous communities? Erica, I think this one would be your question. Thank you. Yeah, it was on.
Happy to talk about this a little bit. Some of it's going to be a bit hypothetical because I don't think we have any real world use cases where this is done well yet. I especially think luxury could be a first mover in this space because one of the things that you had talked about was block printing in India, right? Which is becoming a lost art. There's a lot of beautiful textile manufacturing that also happens in Africa. And that also is very often co-opted by some brands as well. I think Laura Priana was just kind of got in a little bit of trouble about their cashmere production and maybe misappropriating some indigenous communities and maybe underpaying them for the work that they're doing because the margins, it was disclosed, are so astronomical, but it isn't uplifting the community doing the actual hands-on labor. So something I can imagine is these craft, especially luxury, because craft is so ingrained in what makes luxury desirable. There could be an opportunity to embed remuneration models using blockchain in the supply chain that also is a signal when you're wearing this item. And when someone visually sees this, you can speak to it, you can prove it authentically with blockchain verification in your digital passport that proves where this was manufactured, even who was manufacturing. It could get into the craft of the design. I also believe when you're working in a design capacity, I don't know how many of you work in design or in fashion brands, a lot of this type of craft shows up on mood boards. And so it might inspire companies like Zara, H&M that are in fast fashion, whereby they're maybe co-opting a look and feel in the design, but they're not actually remunerating or giving credit to those communities that are doing the source work inspiring that fast fashion. So I think there could also be a way in which if you're being inspired by or utilizing something from, let's say, an indigenous community, they might gather together and look for a licensing model where they're getting remunerated for people that are using their look and feel. And maybe it's a diffusion strategy or a takedown strategy where it's not the actual block printing, but it's inspired by, and they might have a licensing model that brands can then tap into. So it's not too much work for them to fire up their procurement team and their licensing team to go figure out how to do these contracts, but there could be a collective cluster that might be representing these communities or on behalf of them that then brings, let's say, the procurement companies or supply chain teams from manufacturing back in to make sure that those folks are cut into the supply deals.
Thank you very much. Well, exactly. I think the cases that you presented, especially about cultural DAOs and tokenized cultural DAOs, I think this engagement of the community and creating this new type of values and within the new value systems that we're talking about, which would represent the emerging desirable futures in which we want responsible and digital together to empower humanity, creativity, and all the other aspects of the responsible transition. So the question is then, in your experience, since you have worked also with many brands and you're an expert in the domain, in what similar, let's say, adjacent sectors or industries or capacities have you seen this social movement or technical movement is getting closer to what we are talking about now here?
I think, I mean, maybe I'm a little biased. Sport is interesting because sport is selling passion, and fandoms are what create the desire for you to buy that Manchester United jersey. What is the name? Wrexham? Is that the name of the football club in England? Yeah.
Wrong crowd.
Okay. Well, he knows. Wrexham, right? Am I saying it right? That Ryan Reynolds purchased, yes. So here comes a billionaire in Hollywood who's buying a team, but what's actually happening is these fan supporter networks are getting uplifted through the visibility that's created by Ryan Reynolds moving the broadcast camera onto that team. They're pumping out merch. What could happen, though, if you take a look at the fans in the stadium and how football fandom and football culture is actually created, it's micro communities of supporter networks that actually make up the stands and make up the fandom. And what's starting to happen is brands are cluing into this, and they don't want to just sell you one jersey for the home kit or the second jersey for the away kit. They want to get you connected to the culture that's going on in the stands. And so they're giving creator rights to these small supporter networks that are these like fan networks that are within, let's say, the blood of that Wrexham football community. So maybe instead of the home kit and the away kit, every single game in the future is going to have a different kit. And that kit is going to be somewhat co-created so that the cultural credibility of the fans are going to be embedded in the design. And then that's going to have maybe a remuneration model that uplifts those fan communities to help them get some visibility and access and maintain the credibility of the sport. So I think it's starting to happen. I believe also you could see this as a model that could be replicated across all sports, whether that's basketball, especially cricket in India. So that's just starting to happen, and I think it's only going to grow from there.
Thank you very much for this great example. As we were talking with Bharat as well, and yourself, about the behavioral economics that technology can play in reshaping the sociocultural aspects via behavioral economic re-engineering. And this also creates new type of economies, and in which we need, again, new metrics, measures, and indicators to understand them. Because as we know, like as you said, there are many new type of economies that are being emerged with the tokenization and Web3, and of course with AI, and many more, that there are new means of generating value, which means that there are more options to make money technically. And as we know, like in gaming especially as well, since you have a lot of experience there as well, so the concept of like earn to play, how do you see that concept might have a shift, socially speaking, when your kid doesn't need your help with the pocket money, but it might be able to help you back? Yes.
Yeah, I think brands and companies spend a lot of money in advertising and marketing. But what if you can move your advertising and marketing to a more credible vehicle, which is peer-to-peer engagement and peer-to-peer evangelizing and peer-to-peer promotions? And that, to me, is the example that I had tried to provide, which is when people are allowed to show proof of participation in something and they do an action in order to get a token to the pre-order, or a token to access the drop, or maybe a limited edition colorway, something get it first, or you get the free digital twins. So when you show up in Roblox, you and like only 250 people are the only ones with a digital version, but everybody else can go buy the physical. So I think you can create those like reward mechanisms in your go-to-market strategy by moving those things upstream and thinking about how to use them as promotional vehicles. And then you can offset your investment in media and marketing promotions on the back end. It also creates more limited edition items, and there are big secondary markets. These new business economic models are coming. I would say a lot of the gaming worlds are still Web 1.0, so they've got their own economic models that are not yet making it very desirable for brands to come in yet, because it doesn't generate enough revenue to be a profitable stream on its own, but it's early days. They're all trying to create their own new creator economies and creator marketplaces. And I think they're trying to figure out how brands will play a role in that, in this like 5.0 move. So you see early signals of it, but it is happening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So building on top of what Erica just explained as a fantastic example. So the new economy that we're talking about, since it's heavily digitally empowered, it's also much heavily gamified, much more than the previous economies and other types of economies. So the new gamified economy of Industry 5.0, in which all industries and sectors and societies can gamify and engineer socio-behavioral shifts and psychological calibration across our societies and markets by using tokens. And of course, AI, digital twins, and soon quantum computing commercially applicable is going to completely support that transition to engage communities more in order to recognize values of different types. Different type of value needs to be recognized. And Web3 and blockchain can help us quantify the qualities of a society or a market. When engaging the community and stakeholders at different stages, from governance down to supporting with the design or having their inputs important and influential to the internal decision-making of the company, that's a great start for community engagement, which is tokenized and therefore quantified. So I think that was a very, very good example for closing this question. Thank you very much. So can decentralized treasuries be designed to fund long-term climate governance projects driven by satellite verification or orbital digital twins?
Wow, that's quite a question.
Yes, I have to read it again. So I think we discussed a bit about space, that we still need to have a lot of governance that still has to come in the space aspects. And the last treaty, as we saw, which was signed, was in 1967. And the question is, how can we bring rest of the world on one table to come up with one governance model, right? And I think the solution could be the decentralized, safe way, and blockchain technologies, for example, can bring that trust, first of all, to have the interconnections, right? And that's where I believe decentralized ways of having those transactions could be interesting, first of all, not just for the climate governance, but also the entire sustainability of the orbital economy. So I could think of a couple of examples, like the space-based insurance, right? So right now, a lot of companies are launching their initiatives in the orbit, and you need to produce the data. At the same time, there are a lot of maintenance issues with the satellites that collect that data. So what if the satellite companies are able to have the transactions using blockchain immediately and make them autonomous, trustworthy transactions, right? These are the things that are already happening. There's a company that I think I know is called Space Chain, right? So they have that's what we were discussing during lunch. They have already developed their platform to govern the climate-based reporting systems, trustworthiness, using the entire formulation of the blockchain. And I think that could be interesting, apart from having the digital twins for the farmers to be able to understand what could be the impact of changing environment for the farming facilities. There is a company also in Luxembourg called Ibiza, a startup company, and they're using Earth observation data to provide the insurance companies the data to help the farmers at the end to get the best deal. So I think there are a lot of ideas that we can think of. Once again, it's all about the intention. I keep on coming back to this point that the technologies are existing. The intentions perhaps are not there yet. Yeah.
Please.
So I was part of a team that tried to do this in 2021. We'd find out, so back then, the big hype was telling the public that your blockchain was not consuming as much energy as Bitcoin and that it was to some extent green. So what we did with a group of community members is try to measure, in the absence of regulatory standards at that time, we tried to measure the carbon footprint of our network. And then we put together the first kind of global impact challenge for our community of token holders. And we raised enough funding to plant 1 million mangrove trees. Now, mangrove trees are very specific because they have an ability to not only do the whole carbon sequestration thing, but they can also enable the protections of shorelines and the creation of kind of eco-biodiversity and all these kind of things. So they went with this. We partnered with a company called Veritree that were actually looking at how do we triangulate satellite data, IoT, and human intelligence, people on the ground, local communities. And how do we do this at scale at a cost that is low enough to make us competitive versus all the other carbon registries like Gold Standard or Vera? I always forget that one, but it's the biggest one. It has 80% of the market share. What they were able to do is reduce the distance between donors and, let's say, the planters and the planting communities. What they were not yet able to do was figure out how to provably scale verification. They're very close, but every single time, one of the main challenges, despite what technology brought in, one of the main challenges was finding the right incentives, the right incentive points for the local community to validate what they see from up there, what they see from the IoTs on the ground, and all these kind of things. Now, that was a community-funded thing. So I've got a couple of trees in Kenya, south of Mombasa, that I should go and check out and make sure that they're still there. This was a pilot, and it was to offset the blockchain's carbon footprint. Now, we have $1 billion treasury. And we also have regulatory standards from the EU that say, this is what kinds of standards you should disclose as a traded cryptocurrency on exchanges for the environment. So we've done that exercise. And what I'd love to do is see, okay, out of this $1 billion treasury, can we create an innovative financial instrument that is paid for by a community of thousands of people that decides, hey, you know what? We want to finance this perhaps as a green bond. That could be a thing we're looking into. Just last week, okay, before I get into this, who understands what staking means in the context of crypto? Okay, so imagine you have, okay, so right now, I'm gonna hand Teddy this block, right? You're all what are called validators on a network. You've all observed that I have this block and I've given it to him. For you telling your friends that this actually happened outside of here, because they don't know what happened here, they never saw this transaction happening. For you to be a validator on a blockchain network, you will receive a staking reward. So you'll be financially incentivized to make sure that the blockchain network is proving this transaction happened, okay? So when you do that at scale, you can actually create financial instruments based on this. And what we've done is we helped the UN Refugee Agency set up a exchange-traded product based on staking rewards where externals never touch crypto, but can purchase an ETP the same way that you buy security on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange or the Swiss Stock Exchange, and you can support the refugee cause. We could very well think about using a decentralized treasury to purchase this kind of financial instrument or a different kind of financial instrument as a community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for both sides, because it was really interesting how we connected back up and then we came down. So exactly like convergence, divergence, and emergence, beautiful examples, because the emergence of new business models, new economic vehicles, new financial designs. So thank you very much for elaborating on this. Let's see what's next on the screen. The practical applications of Cardano's principles in building cognitive governance infrastructure where trust, compliance, and adaptability must coexist, sir.
This is a big question, but I'm going to try to give it a very simple answer. Cardano or any truly decentralized blockchain technology, what blockchain is to AI, and agentic AI in particular, is what writing was to humans. What writing for humans does is it allows us to record a fact or truth, or relative truth and fact, depending on what it is, but it's to record some form of data by a person that could be shared with another person. And what that did for humanity is outstanding. And the more we were able to access information beyond clay tablets and papyrus and everything else that followed, all the way to the printing press and now the internet, it did a lot of things for the way that humans can communicate, can trust each other, can transact. And that has a huge inherent business value. Now, if you're thinking about AI agents, these are, let's say, each one of us has 10 mini-me's running around, sorting our travels out, doing our investments, and interacting with other AI agents. They need to find a scalable and trusted platform where their identity, the identity of their owners, and the proofs of their actual transactions can actually happen. And I think blockchain technology can be super useful for not only agentic trust, but also agentic transactions. So there's a big thesis right now around the value of stable coins, not only for human-to-human payments or organizational payments, but actually agentic payments. And that's one of the big bullish cases that we're seeing in the market right now.
Integrative value ecosystems, like everything connected together. And Teddy, you had an example. I don't know if you would like to share it here or later about uploading. Do you know? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your mic is also off. Okay. We keep it for later, maybe. So, so the way that you just explained it, it reflects also what we discussed about the futures in which embedding cultural values with technologies would drive innovation and would create financial gains and help us to move to the responsible transition. Right. So linked to this also, when you were talking about the other project at Cardano, in circular economy, the other work that we do also with our Circular Economy Research Center and also at ReTech Center specializations. So we use a lot the examples that you shared as well directly for circular economy, as also we have a lot of projects with the EU commissions for advancing research that we work with our EDBAs. So these are fantastic examples, and everything that all the possibilities that you're sharing here, those are open doors for innovators and investors, our community, and also our doctoral community who would address the gaps in practice by contributing to literature. Thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you for Cardano. With Cardano, we have a very interesting project coming up. It's been more than 3 years that we are working and discussing and ideating around this project, and soon we will share more news. But for now, it's a pleasure to give some background on Cardano. Could tokenized feedback loops in the fashion ecosystem serve as governance 5.0, where social, environmental, and cultural metrics drive real-time public-private decisions? So we have culture, we discussed, we can elaborate, governance, of course, tokenization, and fashion. The floor is yours. So feedback loops in the sense that while using sensors and IoT devices, this feedback can be tokenized and, of course, traceable, transparently shared with the ecosystem, which provides more transparency and also provides the support with the points that Simone mentioned. Did you find your microphone, sir?
I don't want to say anything about this. It's such a complicated question, and it requires a lot of knowledge. Just that, as you said, if there is the will to set up a governance system that enables a business model based on creating wider stakeholder value, the tools are there. The tools are all there. It's a matter of will. It's not a matter of technology. Due diligence, which is the backbone of that, the backbone of management, of responsible management, sustainability due diligence, is greatly empowered by tokenized feedback loops and so on. Because this is exactly what due diligence needs, what due diligence is. So this is, I think this is a testament to the fact that there is no excuse for sustainability. Of course, we must not forget that financial value is still there, still important. If invested capital doesn't produce enough returns, the company collapses. It's all true, but innovation now is needed in business modeling, because the technology that makes this kind of engagement possible is there. So the real innovation, in my opinion, if we really want to leverage the power of the technologies connected to Industry 5.0 and 4.0, the real piece of innovation is in business modeling. And I want to shut up forever.
Thank you very much, Simone. Thank you. Well, beautifully put together. Thank you. Oh, you're leaving now?
I'm leaving in a few minutes.
Okay, so maybe we can keep you. Okay, so how can human centricity, craftsmanship, and cultural legacies serve as competitive assets in Fashion 5.0's regenerative transformation? Of course, this is yours.
No, it's not mine. These guys are much better than me, and you have to listen to them. Again, whenever we speak about digital twins and the possibility to have digital twins of the product development and the production process, you need to factor to envisage that there is a human factor, and that this digital twin must take into strong consideration the reality of human rights in labor. And the risk is that we create a performance system that overlooks human rights and that forces people to non-human forms of performance, especially as regards artisans. We spoke about micro producers, and the reality of artisans is that product development processes are longer than in the industry. Production times are longer than in the industry. So yes, this is all true, but human-centric means that we factor, the human nature and human rights into our digital twins. Otherwise, we create structures of exploitation. And the very final point, every technology that raises the productivity of labor in general, horizontally up, ends up with the risk of burning jobs. You do not burn jobs when you raise the marginal productivity of labor, and you create an incentive to hire more people. So creativity here in this framework is about creating new tasks for humans to interact virtuously with machines. I go away, otherwise my wife kills me. That's another human-centric.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very strong human-centric.
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Maybe adding a little bit to this to maybe ground it in the real world. When you work with an artist like Beyonce on her fashion line, Ivy Park, and she wants to put out a collection, she did a denim-inspired collection that was really connected to her roots of being from Texas, and she wanted to connect it to the Black cowboys. And through her work, she wanted to also educate, maybe subconsciously, youth that Black culture was very much inspiring our understanding of Western cowboys today. So she made sure her reference material was really credible to Black cowboys. She made sure to bring in stylists and designers that used those references, used real world models, found real people, brought them into the campaign that really were authentically from that community. So like this human centricity, when you're working with an artist like Beyonce, is pulled through all the way from her inspiration and her concept development through the execution. So the actual people in the creative are from that community. Are they necessarily getting paid when that collection is going live? And is Adidas writing them a check, or is the end user knowing that a fraction of the money that's going to purchase those denim pants is going to that community as well? Not necessarily. That's all behind the scenes, right? But you could imagine in a world going forward, that stuff could be made public. It could be on blockchain. One of the maybe smartest things I did, or one of the dumbest things I did, when we did our first Into the Metaverse launch and we sold 30,000 NFTs for about $800 a pop and generated around $23 million overnight, we equally split the revenue with our partners because it was on chain. Because we knew how we are perceived and how this drop is seen by people that really understand. You can look at the blockchain and truthfully understand where the money is going. It mattered. And so we did an equal split. Looking back, I mean, we did a lot of the work, and then we fundraised, of course, from that, and needed to then take the profits and reinvest it in continuing to do work. So it was very challenging for us to have to come up with a sustainable business model using Web3 when there were no playbooks. But I will say, I do think as we're moving to this, vision of 5.0, that's going to be what's required.
Thank you. This is amazing. And I will add something but to that. And this is why Industry 5.0 is more than critical, right? I come off from Africa, grew up in France, and we have a sentence here in Paris, which literally says, the suburbs influences Paris, Paris influences the world, right? When it comes to fashion, right? I think it's not by chance that we have Pharrell Williams that have been appointed as the creative director of Louis Vuitton. Okay, it's coming from the streetwear. Okay, and we are talking about Black pop culture. Okay, you all know about Virgin Abloh. We passed away a few years ago. So, and coming from Central African Republic and Congo, you might have heard about the sapeurs, okay? La Société des Ambianceurs, etc., etc. Bref, they are very cultural legacy, not necessarily craftsmanship in those regions, but in Kenya, we have craftsmanship that have been appropriated culturally by some global brands as well. And the people that owned the savoir-faire and those cultural, let's say, assets that have been used by global brands to make money, they haven't been retributed for their contribution to the fashion industry. And this is a concern as well. And this is why Industry 5.0 is very important, because the digital, see it as a tool. This is the infrastructure layer for traceability, identity, also tokenize the participation and all of that. So you can literally track everybody being part of the supply chain as well. But not just in the production, but also the IP, right? And then the responsible, because Industry 5.0, it's about digital and responsible transition, right? So the responsible part is about the vision. It's about the will to make sure that all the stakeholders that are part of the value chain get a proper retribution for their contribution. And it's very important. So it's not just about appointing a creative director, which is coming from the culture. It's about making sure that the culture also benefits from the value creation as well.
Follow up? No?
I think one thing I think about, I don't know if there we go. One thing I've been thinking about is, here's a hot take. I could be wrong. Let's write it down and we'll check it in 15 years. I think some of the biggest brands won't actually own factories, fashion brands. I think it's going to get too difficult. It's going to be too hard operationally for them. There's going to be too many stakeholders. They're going to create actually networks and this kind of, I don't know what the fashion cluster means here, but that's actually interesting language. I think that's where we're moving. I think the greatest brands you know today are going to be facilitators of community, and they're going to be managing the relationships with these communities that help them to maintain and grow their brand stretch and expand their brand identity. And I think they're going to be the most powerful IP holders and licensors in the world. That's my hot take.
Thank you very much, which dovetails beautifully to the next question, since about governance and sharing benefits, but this time leveraging financial tools and Web3 blockchain and DAOs behind them as the foundations of the space economy. So we are linking all of them together to see how exactly what Erica and Teddy now elaborated on would be applied in this example of sharing the benefit.
I think we have discussed several times that this technology definitely has what we need in the space sector. Like, as I mentioned, this is decentralized. We need to build the trust. We need to bring rest of the world together. What if we have DAOs, for example, for the global south, so that they can be compensated for the data that they create, right? So we have a lot of Earth observation data. Maybe those kind of things can be incentivized for the insurance purposes, right? So in this space, insurance is a big issue. This can be used immediately. You have a solar flare up and your satellites are being destroyed. You get paid immediately, right? So maybe there could be currencies, cryptocurrencies that can come up to compensate for those efforts. There could be, different other scenarios where you can come up with the Finternet, right? So financial technology and that operating system working specifically for the space technologies, like you mentioned, machines to machines conversations, right? So if you have a lunar base, there are a lot of companies that are working on lunar bases to establish their first stop before they go to Mars. And those companies will mostly use robotics, like their robotic arms being used or extraction mechanism to make water. You can have different private commercial companies set up their shop and have that e-commerce happening, or I am not an expert, how do you call that kind of commerce, using blockchain. And then while you're sitting on Earth, this transaction continues to happen. So while there's governance, the speed is not hampered. What I keep on coming back to same aspect, there has to be intention, but in this scenario, it is so commercially viable. I think in this particular instance, the convergence will work definitely. Yeah.
And then there will be the emergence of exactly what you explained, like the emergence of new business models, business opportunities, and then the integrative value ecosystems in which now you took it up to the space, but exactly the same concept. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to add
please.
something to that. There are some regions in the world where connectivity is a luxury, right? Internet cost it's crazy. It's crazy how expensive connectivity could be in certain regions of the world, right? So to bounce back on what you just said, it's pretty interesting. We can imagine a company launching a telecom satellite, right? And getting financed by the people and the local community that will benefit from the connectivity on the ground. So that can also help, I won't say build generational wealth, but also as a kickstart, because if the people on the ground own a portion of the satellite, because they have been the one financing a part of it, they could generate revenue from the usage and the sales of the connectivity to the region and maybe the whole country as well. And you can pass it down to your children and so on, because the satellite lasts in space for centuries, So we have to be imaginative. I mean, but the tech is there. Now it's how do we use it to solve real world problems, but also to empower the people on the ground that need it the most as well.
Like triangulation, like you mentioned, engaging communities together with the technology and some kind of commercial viable model that can work, right? So.
Bharat, so how might cognitive and anticipatory governance frameworks be extended to orbital systems, ensuring equitable access, regulation, and data sovereignty across nations and not non-state actors?
Can I give this a shot?
You can start. Thank you.
It's not going to answer the whole question, but I think last question on this one as well. Not to stifle innovation, but certain things do require some level of jurisdiction and regulation to some extent. And the crazy thing is, right now, countries don't even agree on whether a digital signature is legal and binding across borders yet. Which to us, you get a DocuSign like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. There are aspects to this. Now, if you're talking about extending this in terms of data sovereignty on Earth, it's already pretty tough, but as well as orbital systems where we know that there's a lack of regulation since 1967. Well,
still the free world out there.
So there's good and the bad of this, right? What we've experienced in the blockchain industry is up until there's a certain level of regulatory clarity from incumbents, especially in nation states like the US, it is highly risky to engage in that industry if you're an institutional, right? Up until very recently in the US, there were big questions as to whether certain kinds of tokens were securities or not. Eric, I'm pretty sure like these questions popped up when you were looking into NFTs, all those years back. And I think the same questions are now being answered, but we will still have this issue of, can we deploy institutional capital that is actually going to kind of shift the needle, pension funds, etc., if there is a lack of governance frameworks that are agreed on at an international level, which is tough because for most people, multilateralism is dead, and that's kind of what we need for something related to space as a treaty.
Even for Earth, right? So what we see right now, all the issues that we have, we cannot agree on similar frameworks. United Nations is not working the way we were hoping that it would work. So if it cannot work for Earth, how would it work for the space? So this question is beyond my paycheck. I don't know how to answer it. But at the same time, you can try to have a bit more, equitable aspects. Like if China, as I was saying, was able to launch, or they're already launching series of satellites that are connected through AI. It's a first supercomputer in orbit. And they're completely, they're not sharing the data. There's lack of transparency. But what if the other countries or the other side, they're also launching their satellites and they have more data and they're able to equate? That can, you have an equal sum game happening there, because everybody would try to do the same. And this way, it's like you have what has happened with the nuclear energy, right? Everybody has nuclear weapon, like India and Pakistan, for example, had an issue, but that war cannot happen because both the countries know that we have nuclear power. And if we do something, it's going to destroy both the countries, right? So that kind of scenario could happen, but it's too early to see how and in which format all the countries will come together and share information. There was a moon lander by India that India was able to launch a vehicle on the moon. Just before that, it was Israel, which had failed. And there was no data shared between these countries to be able to see what is failing and what have we learned. So I don't want to be pessimistic, but it looks very difficult. Yeah.
So your worry is that we're going to have a mutually assured destruction through space and AI, and that we need to mitigate it somehow, somewhere. Okay, that sounds scary.
Yes, it is. But I think we all know the consequence, so this might not happen.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. I have to run to catch a flight, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Erica, for joining us. Thank you, Erica. So, thanks, Bharat and Alex and Teddy. So, with Cardano smart contracts and self-sovereign identity, enabling transparency and anti-counterfeiting in decentralized luxury.
So, having Cardano there or any other kind of blockchain generally, smart contracts make it easier for you to trust a computer program to execute in a certain way. Essentially, a smart contract is nothing more than a nested if function on Excel, but the Excel spreadsheet lives across 1,000 different computers, so you can make sure that it's real. and that the smart contract will actually execute based on certain criteria. I think what I've seen in the industry as it relates to transparency and anti-counterfeiting is a need for public permissionless blockchains. So public, meaning that anybody can see the data that is on there. What kind of data you put on is a different story, but you can see what's there. And permissionless in the sense that anybody can upload data. That's versus permissioned, and then public versus private. There have been private permission chains, usually launched as consortia, and some still exist. There's I think there's the Aura consortium blockchain that has like LVMH and a few others that are doing stuff. And then a few, essentially what tends to happen is consortium blockchains do not attract competitors, because can you trust being on the same digital infrastructure as your competitor? Does that make business sense? Uploading information about your supply chains, your suppliers, your times of sale, all these kind of things. So there's usually a risk averseness to that. Hopefully they start moving towards, let's say, permissionless blockchains. And then when it comes to digital identity, the biggest challenge that has existed is that the current standards may not actually comply with the EU's GDPR, so their privacy rules. And there is a fragmentation of standards. So there's the W3C, which is a digital identity standard that is well recognized. But what tends to happen there is you get a fragmentation between your W3C DID standard, yours, and yours. And if we have to go and try to actually all go together and share our digital identity on different W3C issued credentials, we run into the issue that we're not interoperable. So one of the things that some of our teams are working on is a more interoperable standard that is based on a whole bunch of different acronyms and technical jargon that I will spare you today. But mostly we see the industry moving into a public permissionless layer, either as a permissioned L2, but then still settling on the open blockchain, so to speak. And yeah, there's a growing interest in this, particularly as it relates to digital product passports. So again, regulation and compliance to this regulation creates markets that essentially enable opportunities for technology to drop compliance costs. That's one of the main things that I've seen so far.
Thank you very much. Very good example. So we are going to take maybe the last question from the audience. If there is any question, also send it or share it here. So let's choose which questions you are more interested in elaborating as the final question. So Fashion 5.0. So then we can have an open conversation then. And maybe as the closure for, no, not this one. Yeah, we keep it here for now. So for closing this conversation on Exponential Innovation 5.0, and of course the elaborations on different aspects and examples of Industry 5.0 from different sectors and all disciplines, please share your final thoughts about what we discussed, or what would be your message to which type of audience that we have here as executives, innovators, investors, decision makers, or policy makers.
Sure. So I think what I've learned here today is technology is exponential, that there is a massive human element to it that is unescapable, either from the user or the beneficiary's perspective, and that these sorts of technologies ought to be used in a responsible fashion on Earth and now in space.
My take and my last word would be that, technology is exponential. It's not going to slow down. It just keeps speeding up. And it's a new global power that we have to harness as a collective, but also from a governance perspective, right? This is why tech diplomacy is important, because we have now companies, private companies, which are as powerful as nations, sometimes more powerful than nations, right? And we have to make sure to, let's say, to not to regulate, but to make sure that we implement the right governance. And this is why Industry 5.0 is important. The digital is a tool, is the enabler again. And the responsible part, it's about the vision and the willpower to do better for all of the stakeholders. That would be my take today. Whatever the industry is, whatever the domain, space, fashion, or whatever.
Yeah, so yeah, it works. So what, from my perspective, right, so I completely agree, and I'll try not to repeat what they said, right? But exponential, I think the human curiosity is where we discussed today, that we are so curious, trying to converge different topics. And of course, technology is existing. There's a huge impact of technology on whatever we are doing in terms of society and individual aspirations that we have. So those exponential efforts are existing, and we should continue to push forward. And as potential practitioners, researchers, there are a lot of gaps that you can already see, and also as an investor, right? So there's a gap between having those technologies and then how do you implement it? How can I be shameless, if I can use that word, to enter inside different convergence, different transactions that are happening, right? I'm not from space. Can I be into space? And right now, today, I'm inspired to think about fashion as one of the potential topics that we could consider, or even learn a bit more about blockchain, the entire DAO system. So that intersection, Saman, that you were showing yesterday during the workshop of different aspects, industries, the skill sets, that's the important area for all of us to consider, and something that we need to educate to the students, to the practitioners, but also mostly to the investors. And we were just discussing, like, it's very difficult for me sometimes to represent some of the startups in space, in microgravity topics, to explain the investors what it takes for them to get the ROI, because they are looking at the KPIs which are coming from the previous experiences in the digital areas, number of subscriptions, the dollar value that you return, etc., etc. But it's much beyond that. I think there's a value in all the discussions that we have. The human-centric part for long-term vision is extremely important, and let's just keep that curiosity alive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the cultural aspects, the governance aspects, the leadership questions that were raised, the points on strategy and competitiveness. So these are all the keywords that I think the audience also captured really well through different examples and at the intersection of different topics and disciplines. So the topics that we discussed today and many more are among the specialization tracks of ReTech Center across the RISE labs. So these projects are open in research, innovation projects, skills, which are certificate and degree programs, and engagement, which is the work that we are doing with our fellows, and the network of experts. So thank you all very much for joining this, because exponential innovation, thanks to your contributions, we redefine the role of foresight. We discuss what is Foresight 5.0. We didn't have this keyword, but that's what we talked about. It's the foresight, understanding the emerging potential futures of digital transformation, and then adding a layer of responsible transition for the desirable part of it, and make sure that we work towards the desirable emerging futures of 5.0. Thank you all. Follow us if you're not following us, and then stay in touch for the next conference. Thank you. Campaign. Thank you very much. Fantastic conversation, great topics, very, very good talks. Thank you.